great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device. It is absolutely lovely, as always, for you to join us. Thank you so much indeed. I'm with you all the way until 1, and as always, got a lot to talk about. A lot of breaking news in the show yesterday, and a lot of that is in the news today as well. We're going to be talking about Keir Starmer warning that Britain is entering an era of hard power. Forget the soft power of all that foreign aid spending. Not that it gave us any soft power, but the hard power of being able to actually defend your country and allies, as he slashed the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. But do the figures given by Keir Starmer in that statement at lunchtime in the Commons yesterday actually add up? Some question marks about that. Plus, overnight we've learned that Ukraine has agreed a mineral rights deal with the US. President Zelensky is set to sign the deal in Washington as early as this Friday. That's the day after Keir Starmer's got his meeting with the US president. The deal, though, we understand, does not provide a US security guarantee to Ukraine. So is it worth the paper it's printed on? Plus, we'll be talking, as we just did with Mike Graham there, more about the government's climate advisors. They are the Climate Change Committee. You think a committee, you think, oh, elected, accountable, maybe it's made up of MPs. No, just a bunch of appointed friends of the, the great and the good. People largely, by the way, without any qualifications in anything remotely resembling science. They've got no more qualification in this area than you or I do. You probably do have. If you've got a science degree, you probably know a lot more of it than they do. But they reckon that Britain's net zero drive will mean that millions of Brits must install heat pumps in their homes. You know, the heating that doesn't work and costs lots more. Buy electric cars. That's most of us will have to be driving electric cars. We're going to have to fly less, if at all, if we go abroad. And we're going to have to cut on meat and dairy consumption. And it's going to cost a whopping £320 billion by 2040. I mean, that's actually just a fraction of what it would really cost. But by the way, ain't doing any of that. So good luck with that, guys. We'll talk about all of that. Plus, a senior policing figure has suggested that non-crime hate incidents, which by definition are not crimes and therefore not within the purview of the police, could be renamed rather than scrapped. This, by the way, is Alison Pearson, the Telegraph columnist, has said that she is suing the police who turned up at her door accusing her of what she thought was a non-crime hate incident, but actually ended up being a criminal charge, they claimed, just for a tweet that she wrote that was clearly not either of those things. We'll be talking about all of that, plenty more besides, including whether or not England should be playing Afghanistan in a test match in this today, when rather bizarrely they seem to think it's a problem when there are black people being discriminated against in a country like South Africa, or taking the knee for Black Lives Matter. Oh, they did all of that, didn't they, the England cricketers? Apparently not an issue when women aren't even allowed to speak or allowed out of their homes, certainly not to play sport or cricket of any sort in Afghanistan. So we'll talk about that as well. Joining me for all the chat today, I am delighted to say, is former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Always great to see you, Matthew.
Good morning, lovely to be with you.
He has remarkable, just before you get worried, everybody, he has remarkably sane views for someone in the Labour Party.
I know. Well, thank you. I mean, no, don't get me cancelled by the comrades. But yes,
well, there is that. I mean, you know,
like to think of myself as
better
a
be careful.
chap.
Better be careful. Mind those comrades. So much to talk about. Now, I've got two questions for you guys here. I'll put the questions out right now before we speak, because you've got your own mind. I'm sure you've got your own views before we give ours. But the government's climate advisor is saying Brits will have to install heat pumps, buy electric cars, give up foreign holidays, eat less meat, all of that to hit net zero targets, which, by the way, won't achieve anything whatsoever. I want to know what your reaction is to that. Usual rules, keep it clean, or I can't actually put them on air. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000, text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. You can leave a message on our YouTube page, and that is free as well. But also, about first topic today, I want to ask your thoughts about Keir Starmer cutting the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending. I want to know, was it the right decision? And tell us why it was. Tell us why it wasn't. Maybe you think that shouldn't cut foreign aid spending. Maybe you think that actually you should cut all of foreign aid spending and boost defence spending by more. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. As I said, the number to call 0344 499 1000. Matthew Larser, let's put some of those questions to you. Big announcement on the defence spending rise yesterday. I think a lot of people really, quite surprised that this has come so soon. But Starmer saying that he was going to go from 0.3% of our national spending, our national budget, effectively, to 0.5%. That would mean an extra £13.4 billion extra a year by 2027. That figure doesn't really quite add up, because actually it would have gone up anyway in real terms and with inflation. So actually we've got £7.9 billion sort of shortfall. The extra sum is actually around the £6 billion mark. Here's the other thing though. Cutting the aid budget from 0.5% of GDP to 0.3%, that basically saves £6 billion. But a lot of that spending is on things like defence pensions. A lot of that spending is on things like our intelligence work rather than actual defences. There's also refusal from Number 10 when asked repeatedly, does any of that defence spending include giving Mauritius £18 billion over 100 years, but front-loaded with far more money coming earlier than later, for in return for giving away the Chagos Islands? They won't say. It's an easy answer, isn't it? No is the answer. If it wasn't no, we have to assume the answer is yes. So is that extra spending on defence actually just smoke and mirrors even, or is it real?
So I think it's real. I think that the Prime Minister could have been a wee bit clearer in his language by saying it's a total, more will be spent on defence, which is the 12 billion or the higher figure, and the extra money announced yesterday is kind of about 6 billion per year. I think it's very important that that money doesn't get lost either on things like the Chagos deal. I suspect that the Chagos deal will, post the visit to Washington, be pushed further off the table. It
should be dumped
into
completely.
The bin. Absolutely. So I think that in the end we won't have to worry about the Chagos deal coming out.
You think that?
I think that the government would like to go with it. Yeah, and I think using Trump as your reason. Won't
that look really bad to the comrades? I mean, to all your human rights lawyer friends at all your dinner parties in North London, giving in to the orange man in Washington, Washington, that's as opposed to some sort of highfalutin principle. That's not going to look good to the comrades.
No, look, I mean, I think they're going to be so... some of the comrades, and of course these aren't just people in the Labour Party, but kind of what you might call left liberal opinion, will be kind of outraged by the cut to the aid budget anyway, that I think the Chagos Islands will be the least of their worries in terms of their outrage. But, you know, there is going to be some pushback from left liberal opinion, and I think it's a test for Keir that he stands firm on what
Well,
he
it was
believes is
interesting that
right.
this was kept so quiet, and we understand the cabinet ministers were only told individually, not together. I'm wondering whether they've even bothered telling David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. Who knows? Bearing in mind that he's been very clear that cutting the aid budget when the last Conservative government, when they took it down from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5%, they said this was catastrophic and was terrible and undermined Britain's position in the world and the like. By the way, that 0.7% of GDP, which ended up being, what, 12 billion quid a year? I mean, literally plucked from nowhere. It was genuinely, it was written on the back of a piece of loo roll. I mean, it was absolutely...
I think it's a campaign target.
It was a campaign target. It was. There is no rhyme or reason behind it other than you can probably get away with that. It's not 1%. It's below, but it's enough. You know, huge sums of money, and it did mean that even when we went through the austerity that we did under Cameron and Osborne, that aid budget was not cut, and so more and more money was being spent on people abroad. And we know the same with USAID, that budget which Elon Musk is now cutting. An awful lot of this stuff. There's stuff that's really good. Anything that is about clean water, education for girls, contraception, all in favour. The rest of it, the Romanian Spice Girls or paying for... giving money to India when they've got a nuclear programme, or we give money to China, for God's sake. I mean, they're a hostile enemy state that are much richer than us. This is absurd. An awful lot of this money is completely and utterly taken by, corrupt kleptocratic leaders. It doesn't do any good. It's just sort of paying for an awful lot of, Cassandras and Tobiases to have a lovely gap year job. It's a load of nonsense. I'm all in favour of getting rid of a load of this stuff, personally. But it's not gone down well with the likes of, David Miliband, former Labour Foreign Secretary. Everyone says, the king across the sea, living in his New York penthouse, of course, on a $1.3 million salary, as the CEO of a charity. Apparently perfectly normal in America, the International Rescue Committee. He said yesterday that the move to cut foreign aid was a blow to Britain's proud reputation as a global humanitarian and development leader. Is it?
Well, I think if we cut our aid completely, the Americans might, and have certainly paused it completely in the meantime, would be a mistake, because I think, as you say, there are some really valuable things that we do for some of the most vulnerable.
But we should only be doing
world.
those valuable things.
Absolutely. I don't think we need to be paying for the Indian space programme and for some of the more outre line items in that expenditure. So I hope that, because it's going to be shrinking, I hope that we look at the effectiveness of it and we really target it where it's most needed.
When it comes to defence spending, we know that this has been welcomed by the Trump administration, and when Keir Starmer sits down with Donald Trump in the Oval Office tomorrow, hopefully sort of not on his knee, sort of like he was like sort of bring your son to work day with Emmanuel Macron sitting next to the desk of Donald Trump when he made a statement yesterday, earlier in the week. He obviously, he's trying to curry favour with Donald Trump, but not just for Britain, but also for the defence of Ukraine. And it is, I think, very good to see the European nations working together properly to try and make sure that they can defend Ukraine. But Donald Trump, I mean, he's called it right. He called it right in his first term of office. The Europeans do not pay enough for their own security. It's not America's job to do our security for us. They've got the rest of the world to worry about and their own defences. 68% of the NATO budget is spent by America alone. I mean, come on, we've not been pulling our weight. It's quite right that the European nations that are perfectly wealthy do pull their weight and spend more on defence. But do you think that what the European nations are going to do you think they will be able to convince Donald Trump and his aides to give a better deal to Ukraine? Because we've got this US-Ukraine mineral deal, we understand. Now, there had been a demand for $500 billion, wasn't it? $500 billion worth of Ukrainian mineral rights. Get it right? Can't speak today. Mineral rights to be given to the Americans in return for all their funding. I think it's $170 billion worth of funding to the Ukraine war, though it was given as grants, not as loans, we understood. But we understand it doesn't contain a security sort of guarantee from the United States. What is the point of Ukraine giving up mineral rights if they're not going to get any security guarantee from the US?
Well, I think it's far from a perfect deal, but I think it's the best deal that they were likely to get out of this.
Well, why give away anything? If US are going to give up helping you, why bother giving them the mineral rights when you're going to need those to rebuild your nation? Yeah, absolutely. I think what they're doing is there's more of a sharing of the rights rather than a sort of takeover from the US. So, effectively, the Americans have got the Ukrainians by the you-know-what, because if the Americans stop the arms shipments, But he said he's going to anyway.
Yeah, well, I think that they're hoping that signing the deal will mean that that he doesn't. I mean, as we've seen with Trump, it's the art of the deal. To go back to his book, he likes to push people right to the edge and then pulls back once they've given some ground. So hopefully this is enough ground to see, at least whilst the peace talks continue, that the arms keep flowing, because otherwise Ukraine's going to run out of them very soon. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it'd be nice to involve Zelensky in the peace talks, wouldn't it? I have to say, I think Donald Trump and America are completely and utterly, abjectly wrong on this. I've said this all along, but we shall see what happens there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because one of the fascinating things is about the sort of the Trump saying, you know, Russia's not the aggressor. You know, Russia, poor little Putin, is big mate. He's done nothing wrong. You know, it was Ukraine's fault that there was this war. And yet, at the same time, saying, Europe, you need to arm yourselves. You need to be spending more because you need to deal with your own security. Well, where's the threat coming from? Was it Iceland? Are Iceland going to invade us? Who are we worried about? I don't know about who. I'm not worried about Finland. I'm not worried about, you know, Cyprus invading Britain or invading the rest of... Oh, is it Russia? Right. So this literally seems to hold these two things in his head at the same time, these two ideas. So Russia is not the aggressor. They've done nothing wrong. They're just defending themselves. And at the same time, Europe, you need to double your spending, because he's asked for 5% of GDP over instead of 2.5%. You need to double your spending because you need to deal with the aggressor in Europe rather than us. Well, which is it? Is Russia an aggressor or is it not? Absolutely. Why do you need to put up your spending if there isn't an aggressor? And in fact, of course, when we were friendly with Russia in the kind of noughties, that's when the spending started to go down across the continent, and even to a certain extent in America from its Cold War highs. Yep. So if you don't have an enemy, you don't spend on defence. So it's daft. And whatever people think of, you know, Donald shaking things up in other ways, I agree with you. He's just completely wrong on this. Are you surprised that Keir Starmer has stepped up like this, or is it again some smoke and mirrors about the actual amount of money? Because again, for me, it's not about the money. It's what do we need? What do we need to defend ourselves and to defend, Western Europe and Eastern Europe from Vladimir Putin? What do we need? Well, whatever we need to spend that amount of money on it, because our way of life, you know, it'll be extra for schools or for more NHS. That's meaningless if we can't defend, you know, Western democracy. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm pleased. I think they were going to get there before too long, but I'm glad that in a way that they've accelerated it. What I would say is that don't underestimate how much of a big decision this is for Keir Starmer, because Labour's instincts are to spend more on foreign aid. When I worked for Ed Miliband, we did a big foreign aid event in the 2015 election. Not sure that won us many votes in the Red Wall. No. It was in Islington as well. And so, you know, the heart and soul of the Labour Party loves a bit of international aid. And therefore, to cut it is a really tough decision for a Labour Prime Minister. Absolutely. Well, look, our next topic is very much linked. It's very much linked. Did you think net zero completely different? No. Pushing net zero policies completely undermines our ability to defend ourselves. It makes us poorer. You can't afford massive defence spending to protect your country and your allies if you're a poorer country, which we are. We haven't got any growth. But also, crucially, if you make our energy more unreliable and more insecure and more expensive, you can't afford to manufacture defence equipment, which we can't. We can barely make our own steel. We can barely make concrete anymore. Our energy costs are 4 times that in the industrial complex than America, and way more than they are in China because of net zero policies. Latest offering from the Climate Change Committee, not an elected accountable body, not MPs. No, these are just completely appointees of the great and the good, you know, with classics degrees and the like, who've done nothing of any use for anybody ever. But these people have been appointed to this committee, bizarrely, to advise the government and instruct the government on their net zero policies. And they have basically said, millions of Brits are going to have to install heat pumps. We're going to need 1.5 million heat pumps installations a year in existing homes, not just the new homes, as is going to be a legal requirement. Also wrong.
But heat pumps, by the way, which cost like twice as much to install, don't actually heat properly. I know, small point was making. That's by 2035. 1.5 million heat pumps installed a year. They basically say that most of us are going to have to drive EV cars, so 3/4 of cars and vans, 2/3 of heavy good vehicles would need to be electric by 2040. We will have to eat a quarter less meat and dairy products, and basically flying abroad, well, not really going to be an option. Maybe one flight a year if you're lucky. I mean, I can't think of more things that would massively impact my life than this. I love my central heating. Genuinely, I've said before, you can take my gas boiler thermostat out of my cold, dead hands, because I will arm myself. No one is coming in my building and stopping me from having my gas boiler. Simple, end of. Don't want to drive an electric car. Cost too much, not reliable. They're also far less green than actually my diesel. Not going to be told by anyone what I can and cannot eat. I'm also not going to be told by anyone when I can and cannot fly abroad. How do you think this is going to go down with ordinary voters, particularly those voters in the red wall who are already deserting your party en masse?
So I think you're right that this has come from a committee of unelected people, members of the great and the good, and so therefore I think it's up to the politicians to say, come on, chaps and chapesses, let's have a bit of common sense here.
Oh no, just abolish the committee. No one should be directing major aspects of our lives and our economic policy who isn't elected and accountable.
Well, I think it's just recommendations. They're not necessarily going to be translated into policy.
Who are they to make recommendations? I may as well ask, McLeaner. May as well ask the bloke who drove my tube train this morning. They've got just as many qualifications.
So, actually, that's what I think that's a very good point, because you need to bring people with you on climate change, and actually maybe what we need
you can't. You can't if they know the facts.
So in terms of whether these are enacted, of course the answer is the government needs to reject most of these. Look,
what's the point of having advisors if you don't listen to them, because what they say is complete abject nonsense?
Well, I actually want to know what the point of the Climate Change Committee is and why these decisions aren't being taken by ministers. We'll maybe come on to talk about the NHS, and one of the things is ministers are trying to take back control of the NHS by getting their hands on the levers of power so they can actually make decisions and cutting out some of the bureaucrats.
The likes of the NHS Chief Amanda Pritchard.
Absolutely. So actually the Climate Change Committee, which isn't a Labour invention, it's been there forever.
I blame the Tories just as much.
Absolutely.
It's the reason why they're out of power.
Maybe we should...
It's the reason why... It is, I think, the reason why they will not be back in power next time round.
Yeah, so I think maybe it's time to look at the future of the Climate Change Committee. Maybe saving its meetings would save some emissions.
Yeah,
hot air, certainly.
Absolutely. Right, okay, I want to hear from you on that. I also want to hear from you on next time cutting the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending. Was that the right decision? Tell us why it was, tell us why it wasn't. What's your reaction to being told eat less meat, fly abroad less, drive an EV and have a heat pump installed in your home? Give us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
We were really quite surprised and, well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree over whether he's successfully achieving that or not, but if you're saying something is your number one priority, you would expect that to be the thing you're spending most money on, wouldn't you? I mean, certainly that's how I would.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and we are getting a lot of common sense, even from my guest today, former Labour advisor Matthew Larser, who worked for Ed Miliband during the 2015 general election campaign.
Yes. I was there for the Edstone, but it wasn't my idea.
He said
quickly, I was physically there.
I was physically in. I was in the country when the Edstone.
I was in Hastings as it appeared.
What a legacy.
Yes.
He definitely wants a legacy now. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on 0344 499 1000, all the stories we're talking about today. Let's go to Simon. He is in Reading. And Simon, you want to talk about, actually, it is, as I've said, you know, the net zero and the energy policy and defence policy announcements, they're very tied in, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make 3 quick points, really, if I could. Firstly, energy security. If Keir Starmer had said, look, we're going to roll back on the climate change, I'll come on to a bit later, but the climate change bit, and we're going to actually go back to gas and oil and start... They would then get loads of revenue from that they could plough into the military budget, let's say, OK? Secondly, you know, in terms of the climate change stuff, this stuff about 2040, well, 25, that's 25 years' time. 25 years ago, we were near enough using radio cassettes. So you've got to put some reliance on, you know, people inventing things to actually make it better, because the stuff that we've got at the moment only lasts a windmill lasts 15 years, then we've got to reuse, take it down. So we may as well roll back the climate drive, if you like, and then just rely on research and technology to actually bring us
human ingenuity. I have no doubt we will come up with cleaner technologies. We just haven't come up with a good one yet. Okay,
absolutely.
So that's point one.
The third point is if Keir Starmer had thought all that through, especially in terms of energy, because without energy you won't build stuff, and if we haven't got our own energy security, we're always vulnerable to attack. And that was shown in the Ukraine war at the start, when everyone ran out of gas straight away. So that's really important. Had he gone through those things, I don't think anyone would be moaning. It would take the country with him as a leader, and this is the problem. You know, you could actually forget the foreign aid thing if you start drilling, because all the fuel and the oil and gas that you get, the revenues you get from that far outstrip what you'd spend on your foreign policy. So it even please the left. So I just don't understand why they don't think things through.
Well, I do. Well, we know they don't. They're ideologically committed to this until they aren't. I mean, that's interesting. They're ideologically committed to the foreign aid budget until they aren't. What do you make of the all the various charities and foreign aid NGOs basically saying this is catastrophic? This is. I mean, apparently many charities were appalled. They say this is going to cost lives, cutting the foreign aid budget.
It will be because for some of them, because the cash cow's gone, you know, and you see in America some of the people are suicidal because all their money's gone for doing lefty woke rubbish, you know, and yes. Spend money where it's really needed. You know, you don't give Malaysia money to build a road when Asia are becoming some of the richest people on Earth. You know, you don't give India a load of money when actually their government are extremely rich as well and got their own.
Exactly. I've always just found that utterly perplexing. Above a certain, we give to the poorest countries, and again, the stuff that actually makes a massive difference to people's lives. That's contraception. That's women and girls' education, clean water. There you go. Inject and vaccines, you know, for the killer child diseases. Once you've got that sorted, then you can think about something else. But we don't even do that properly. Simon, really, really thoughtful. God, I wish he was on the climate change committee or in government. He's a lot more sensible and knowledgeable than most of them, that's for sure. Let's go to Andrew. He's on the line in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Cracking show, and you really put in context. Women and the projects for girls, 100%. Female genital mutilation in extremist Muslim areas, fantastic. The rest of it, no. What Starmer's doing is he wants to go through the door and show Trump that he's got something. Because remember, when Trump's talking about it, he says Starmer's asked for the meeting. So if you ask for the meeting in the corporate world, you have to go through the door with value. And Starmer's got no value because you've been really good this morning, top drawer. This is just what would happen with inflation. Poland went through the door with 4.7. Starmer needs to go to 6. And if he goes to 6 immediately, that drives the economy forward because to Spend on the military. You need steel, you need concrete, you need innovation, and that will drive the economy forward. It's a cracking show this morning. That Matthew, when he said you need to take people with you on a journey, you can see that your studio guest, he's hung round with the Miliband for too long.
Andrew. Andrew, thank you very much. Very kind compliments. Thank you very much. They're not that nice to me at home. I'm going to keep Andrew with me. Thank you very much indeed. Do give your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both. The climate change advisors. Basically, he's going to have more of a rotten life. But we knew that. That's what net zero is about, is having rotten lives. That's what it is. It's like going back, first of all, to the 1950s and then pre-industrial, because that's what you'd have to do to deliver net zero, utterly pointlessly. But crucially, you can't have strong defence if you have got high energy prices and a poor economy, which is what net zero delivers. Do you support the cut to the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending? Do you think it was the right decision? Should you have cut other things? I would say net zero. Oh, yeah. And foreign aid. Yeah, and I'm with Andrew. I would have boosted defence spending a lot more. But it's a bit much, isn't it, for the Tory party? And I'm sure it's going to come up at PMQs today as well to be talking about, it's not enough. Sorry, you guys were in power 14 years. Even Kemi Badenoch. So I've got a load of time for Kemi Badenoch. Were you at the cabinet table privately, not in public? It wasn't your remit, cabinet, collective responsibility. Were you saying we need to spend more on defence when you were in the cabinet before? Because I need to know the answer to that. Because if you weren't saying it before, why do we care what you think now?
Totally, and of course troop numbers actually went down 20,000 under the Tories from the number that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown left.
We couldn't fill Wembley Stadium with our troops.
Absolutely, you could just about fill Wembley Stadium under Labour, and you couldn't fill Wembley Stadium under the Tories. Now, I'm not saying that
we think we're a serious military power. I mean, it's an absolute joke. It really is. Well, we're going to ask Dr. Chris Parry about that. He's a former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Find out what he makes of those announcements up next. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, good luck, everyone, on that. Right now, good luck to us in defending our nation with that increase in defence spending announced by Keir Starmer yesterday. Well, what does a man with rather more military experience than anyone else in the government has? Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CB, is a former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Very, very good morning to you, Chris.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. So, what did you make, just first of all, of the announcement of the extra spending on defence by 2027. We're told it's going to be increasing from 2.3% to 2.5%. That was a target for the government, but there was no date for it. Tories originally had that target for 2030, but Starmer said it was an extra £13.4 billion more a year by 2027 compared with now. But a lot of people are querying whether that number really adds up.
No, it doesn't. It's about 5.8 billion by my estimation. And I'm afraid, as usual with defence funding, people are being very economical with the truth. I think we have to be honest here. Keir Starmer can't go to Washington having not raised the defence budget ever so slightly. And he's going to have to go in through the front door with President Trump with an awful lot more to demonstrate Britain's value to the only military superpower in the free world, if he's going to get any traction either politically or militarily.
Well, it was welcomed by the Trump administration, but not enough, you think, fundamentally? Because I think the Institute of Fiscal Studies said basically the extra sum, if you allow for inflation and what was already planned, is only an extra £6 billion. Now, look, we talk about percentage of GDP, we talk about actual billion numbers. What does that actually mean in terms of what we could buy? What can we do with an extra £6 billion a year that we can't do without it?
Well, we can put sticking plaster over the gradual decline that we've had over the last 30 years, and in benchmarking our capability against the Taliban, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. The fact of life is we've underinvested in defence quite significantly over those 30 years. We've also given quite a lot of munitions to Ukraine. So we've got to restore capability before we can even think about actually stepping up into another league.
Yeah, so for you, it doesn't touch the sides of the need.
Yeah, that's been expressed before, Julia. Yeah. The fact of life is we've got a strategic defence review which was due to deliver. That's been delayed until the autumn. We have to look at what this country wants to do militarily. We always hear about troop numbers. That's irrelevant until you actually establish what you want the troop numbers for. Yeah. The army can't make up its mind whether it wants to do peacekeeping in Ukraine or fight the Russians or deter the Chinese. It's the same with all our other services. Until you know politically what outcomes the government wants, you can't actually resource it properly. Also, the measure of a percentage of GDP is a ridiculous one as well. We need to say what capabilities do we need to deter and defend, and then we say how much is it going to cost.
I made that exact point about half an hour ago because, again, what percentage is irrelevant. Like, what do we need to protect our allies and our interests abroad and our own country against hostile nation states like Russia, like Iran, like North Korea, like China, but particularly Russia at this point? What do we, and Islamist fascism as well, what do we need? And then you spend the money, because it's not an option not to. And this is the thing. Why do you think so many politicians for so long have ignored this? Because I don't think I've spoken to a single military expert or strategist or former defence secretary. You get the likes of Ben Wallace. We know he was arguing behind the scenes as soon as he stopped, in fact, quite often when he was, publicly speaking about the need to spend more on defence. Anyone who knows anything about this has said, we really, really need to up our game. We are in a different era, and they've been saying that for 10 years. Why have so many politicians in a position to make those decisions dragged their feet?
Because there are no votes in defence, and all they care about is being re-elected at the next election. If you come along, as I did in 2006, and say we've got a real threat emerging from Russia and from Islamic State, they say, oh, yeah, we'll deal with that down track. We might not even be in office then, so why do we need to worry about it?
But it's wrong, isn't it? When people say there's no votes in defence, but there are also no votes in the country being impoverished by massively high energy prices because Russia has invaded Ukraine, and the impact of that. If we've spent more on defence, and we've been able to provide a proper deterrence to Russia invading Ukraine, which I think the West could easily have done if they'd chosen to do so, instead of just going, yeah, no problem after Crimea, and then, waiting for Putin to take his next slice of Ukraine. We wouldn't have had the chaos of the energy price hike. We'd probably be better off now having spent more money on defence. I mean, this is the irony, is it's such short-term, dumb thinking to think that defence is something you can slap. Defence is the cornerstone. The first job of a government is defence of the nation state.
And its interest, Julia, as well. I mean, essentially, you always end up spending more in the end to deter people if you don't do it at the appropriate time. I'm afraid to say that political masters are great at taking advice from financiers and people in the city about the economy, but they think they know better than the military experts about the military and strategic aspects. It is, I'm afraid to say I can remember back in 2014 saying there has to be a military response, even if you raise NATO's alert state to what happened in Crimea and the Eastern Donbass. I remember William Hague saying on Radio 4, I was on at the same time, he said, this will just be diplomatic and economic pressure. Well, as soon as you say that to an aggressor like Putin, he says, well, I've got a free hand to take over the rest of our world.
And he read the room right. Indeed, he did. What do you make of Donald Trump's claim and all of his advisors and aides and appointees basically saying, Russia isn't the aggressor here. It's Zelensky who's the dictator. Russia had no choice. It's defending. This is defensive. And at the same time saying, Europe, you need to spend more on defence so you can defend yourself. Who does he think we should spend more on defence for to defend ourselves from?
Well, Julia, I think with President Trump, the one thing we learned from his first administration is he always shows you something outrageous with his right hand while he's doing something else with his left hand. I think that's a case of what's going on here. He's trying to detach Russia from its close alignment with China by saying nice things about Russia. He's trying to settle the Ukrainian dispute. He's also trying to stop the flow of resources and munitions that are coming out of the United States that are supporting Ukraine. We've also heard, of course, he's got a very interesting vested interest in rare earths and other minerals. He is doing America first. But there's a key issue here whereby he's trying to detach Russia from China by being nice to Russia. Don't listen to what he says, just watch what he does.
I mean, at the end of the day, he thinks he can run rings around Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is so much cleverer, more cunning and more wily than Donald Trump is, and also doesn't have to face this silly thing called elections, proper elections, because he can just kill anybody who stands against him. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, very close to Vladimir Putin, he has in the last few minutes while he's been speaking dismissed the idea of peacekeeping forces within Ukraine. This has been discussed by Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. There should be some sort of European, possibly American peacekeeping force to protect Ukraine. He said that would fuel the conflict. If there is no peacekeeping force, if there is no, as we understand from this Ukrainian-US mineral deal, rare earth mineral deal, from what we understand of it, nothing official yet, that there is no guarantee from America for Ukraine's borders, wherever they are then set from Russian aggression, what's the point of any deal?
Well, I mean, they're playing, obviously, as you said, Julia, they're playing a very devious game. What they're saying is we don't want NATO troops in Ukraine. That was one of our original demands, because that's effectively what it would be. The Russians are angling for Chinese peacekeepers on the quiet because they're friends of theirs, and they think that actually China would welcome being in Ukraine, as it would in most of the Middle East as well right now. So there's a big power play going on here to see what would happen. My own solution, which we've discussed before, Julia, is that somehow you have to guarantee whatever borders are agreed in peace. I don't think there's any chance of Ukraine recapturing the occupied territories that Russia has at the moment without external assistance. It's just not possible. Therefore, we have to freeze the conflict where it is, just like in Cyprus, of course, where you have a line of demarcation. I believe NATO membership is not realistic for Ukraine.
Well, Turkey would never agree to it.
But it's not realistic either. You know, we can't commit because any infractions would mean a direct war between Russia and NATO forces. There's no question about that. And Article 5 would apply. What I think can be achieved is that NATO can guarantee Ukraine's borders and say, you know, if there is...
Hold a minute. America, US and Russia guaranteed Ukraine's borders long ago.
In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, and Russia also guaranteed those borders. But it leads inexorably then to what Ukraine probably is thinking about right now. We need our nuclear weapons back.
Yep, it wouldn't have happened otherwise, would it? Just finally, the decision to cut foreign aid as a percentage of GDP to boost defence spending. Again, some of the figures, I mean, a lot of analysis suggesting that the figures that Keir Starmer announced yesterday don't really add up at all. But he's talking about this, we're in the era of hard power. And we talked about foreign aid often as soft power. What soft power do we actually manage to actually use around the world with our foreign aid budget?
Well, Julia, I mean, soft power encompasses a lot of things. Even a warship conducts soft power when it has a cocktail party in a foreign port.
Yeah.
So it's a very broad spectrum, everything from the British Council through our education policies.
The BBC?
Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's a very broad spectrum, and it's quite integrated. It's also including bringing diplomats and military officers here to train them and do all sorts of things like that. The Brits are very good at this, but it is a combination of hard and soft power. You cannot have one without the other. People don't respect you for being Swiss, for example. They respect you for being English. And so the biggest soft power we have, of course, is the English language.
Yeah.
And our ability to actually project our values and also our interests through our language is right at the top of the list.
Absolutely.
It's the combination, and you need to have a balance of investment between hard and soft power that is judged over time. It can't be set in stone either way.
Absolutely. Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, CBE, former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Thank you very much indeed. Matthew Lasser, former Labour Party advisor. What do you make of what he had to say?
Well, I mean, I can understand his frustration that people haven't been taking defence seriously, frankly, from all parties, and not just over the last decade, but really since the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
I mean, what we've just seen is, while you were talking, John Swinney's been giving, the Scottish First Minister's been giving a press conference in Edinburgh where he's condemned the government's move and said that it's short-sighted, I think is one of the phrases that he's used. So I think that
he doesn't even know what a woman is. He doesn't even know what a woman is.
So
how can you take these people seriously?
Well, absolutely, and he's also not responsible for foreign and defence policy.
No.
But so it's very easy for him to say that.
Not a devolved power.
But it's exactly so. But it shows that the kind of pushback you're going to get, they're going to come from the left. The Greens, who are polling at 8 or 9%, they're going to push back on this as well. Interesting to see what the Lib Dems do.
Yeah. Although again, this announcement on the cutting the foreign aid budget to boost defence it was very popular. About 2/3 of the public support that. It's about 90% of people who switched to reform at the last election. But it's still a majority of Labour voters who support it, which I think is very interesting. Just some of your messages coming in on this. Sam says, this should have been done ages ago. We must stop relying solely on America. Louise says this is a Trump effect. Britain failed to up spending when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014. We then failed to boost spending when Russia launched their full-scale invasion in 2022. Trump returned to the White House, and then we wake up. Brian says cutting foreign aid down to a nice round 0% would be a better decision like that. 10:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about non-crime hate incidents. They're going to be got rid of. Well, they're going to call them something different. Is that OK with you? We'll talk about that. This is Talk.
We were really quite surprised and well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree over whether he's successfully achieving that or not, but if you're saying something is your number one priority, you would expect that to be the thing you're spending most money on, wouldn't you? I mean, certainly that's how I would.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company. Matthew Larser, former Labour Party advisor, is also with us. Get his thoughts on what our next guest has to say. He's Rafe Hayedel-Mancu. He's commentator at the New Culture Forum. A very good morning to you, Rafe.
Great to be with you again.
Thanks for joining us. Now, I want to talk about non-crime hate incidents, because there's been a lot of talk about non-crime hate incidents being scrapped. I think the College of Policing were told to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents, mainly because police are supposed to investigate crimes, and by definition, non-crimes aren't crimes. There's a clue in the name. But apparently they're not going to be scrapped. They're just going to be renamed. What's going to happen?
Yes, so this is a decision made by, as you say, one of the chiefs of police there, Lord Herbert, who had previously said and recognised the danger that non-crime hate incidents are causing to public trust in the police. And this, of course, should be the overarching thing. Yep. Trust in the police is sapping away daily as people get more and more evidence of two-tier policing. Yep. And at the same time never having any police come to their door when they're burgled or when their car's stolen or even when they're attacked. And yet, despite having acknowledged the danger that non-crime hate incidents are causing to their public trust, they now think that just changing the name of it is going to be sufficient to somehow make us pleased to still have these with us.
What are they going to call it? Wasting police time with hurty tweet complaints incidents? I mean, that would be more accurate, at least.
Yeah, I thought hurty-feely public penalty notice might be better off with that.
Hurty-feeling public penalty. I love it. But this is the thing. The police don't investigate most crimes. We just had the crime and policing bill announced yesterday, and it got rather overtaken by other events being announced, like the defence spending. But we were discussing it on the show yesterday, and again, everyone we spoke to, the people calling in, and police officers, just saying, but we don't actually enforce most of the laws we've already got. Why are you bringing in new laws? Often actually just simply replacing a law that already exists with exactly the same issue. But if police have time to deal with someone who said something hurty on Twitter or X, but they don't have time to investigate a burglary, or there's one case of reports today, a rape, then for goodness sake, I mean, they don't have time for non-crimes.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to remember here, Policy Exchange did a survey on this last year, actually, and found that there were 60,000 police hours are devoted to non-crime hate incidents. I think there was something in the region of 60 a day are being reported.
There are more than 60 non-crime hate incidents recorded every single day. I've actually put a request into, after Alison Pearson, who's in the news today as well, she said she's now suing Greater Manchester Police for turning up at her door and harassing her, accusing her, she thought at the time, of a non-crime hate incident. Turned out it was actually, no, they thought she'd actually committed a crime with a tweet she'd posted. She hadn't, no charges were brought, but she's actually suing the police, and good for her to do so. But I mean, but we have all these cases. But after that, a lot of people, including me, urged on by the Free Speech Union, of which I'm a member, have made requests to find out if we've got non-crime hate incidents against us. I put my request in back in November. They have a legal duty to reply within a month. It's now end of February. Still no response. I pretty much contact them every week saying you're in breach of your legal duty to me. They won't tell me whether they've got non-crime hate incidents recorded against me.
Yeah, and you're a person in public with a public profile. Think of all those other people, actually, who don't have the ability to do any of this. And remember, there's no anonymity here. There's no right of appeal. Yep. And these things sit permanently. So anybody who's going for a job which requires an enhanced DBS check, yep, will be flagged up.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I don't want to work with children, so it won't be an issue in my career, but should I do? But again, lots of people have them against their name. They don't know. The fact that the police don't even tell them, which is extraordinary.
And the problem here, of course, is that this is just part of that way that our leaders are so out of touch. They think just by giving something a nice rebrand, it will work. Yeah. Well, as we know full well from the history of socialism, the more harmless and the more innocuous a name sounds, the more scary and draconian it usually is. You know, the communists had their thought police prisons, and they were called re-education camps.
Oh, exactly.
And you just wonder how long it will be before some people
you
start
say
to propose
this.
These things.
Non-crime hate incidents were brought in 2014. The Tories were in power. They've again and again said, oh, you mustn't do this. I think it was Suella Braverman who, or Pretty Little Basic, think, no, you've got to you need to stop doing this. College of Policing, whose wages we pay, who train all our police officers, basically went, no, we're just going to carry on doing it. This is the thing I find extraordinary. It's like the same thing with the NHS. Amanda Pritchard, the chief exec, basically being told, off you go, love, you're useless at your job, which is clearly what has happened, and they're quite right to get rid of her. But it's the thing, how is it that we have all these people who are publicly paid for by you and me, responsible for huge budgets, huge responsibility over what happens in our lives, whether we can get an operation, see a GP, whether or not we can speak freely on the internet or be mugged in the street. And yet they are totally and utterly unaccountable, not just to us, but even to the government ministers who supposedly oversee them.
Yes, and let's be clear here, the College of Policing is not an essential fixture in our police force. No. It's a body that exists to advise the police force. It actually is the cancer at the heart of so many of the issues we're talking about when it comes to this, much like university departments of education are the cancer at the heart of the teaching profession, because they're producing the police forces who are indoctrinated with this ideology. We need to get back to the old traditional system. You don't need to have a university degree or any degree to become a policeman. You need to have common sense and be able to actually chase and collar somebody.
But also a sense of right and wrong that actually aligns with the law of the land and the values of British people. And as I say, I think most ordinary police officers do have that, but they're being constrained by the bosses. But basically, you don't get promoted in the police anymore unless you sign up to all the diversity, the DEI agenda, the Black Lives Matter, we're institutionally racist, all the woke stuff, hurty words can lead to riots and violence. And again, none of which has any intellectual, academic, substance to it at all. There is some sense coming from America at the moment on a lot of this stuff. Thank God. I don't know how much it's going to come downstream to us, but I want to ask you about one story. A US-born tech worker. He cannot. Well, actually, no, this has happened in the UK. Apologies. A US-born tech worker has been told by the Court of Appeal, in their ruling here, that he cannot be legally identified as non-binary. Ryan Castellucci moved here in 2019. He's launched legal action after only being offered the choice of being designated male or female in the UK. He's a cybersecurity expert. He says he doesn't identify as a man or a woman. He uses the pronouns they and them and the title MX, which is often used in those ways, is not Mr. or Ms., the court was told. And basically, the court, Lord Justice Singh, two other judges, upheld a previous High Court ruling, basically saying, no, this is something that Parliament needs to decide, not the courts. Unusual. And basically, no, you're male or female in this country. Now, this is something that Donald Trump has brought back to America. Your passport says male or female, and it has to actually match your biological sex, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon. But, I mean, this is a little bit of hope for us all, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's encouraging to see the judge say this. Look, non-binary status is not recognised in British law. I like to say I'm binary. My pronouns are 101010. That's a bit of a computer joke. The key thing here is that this is something which the courts cannot be involved with, because this is an issue of huge, profound importance for the morality of the state. These are moral questions, and they must have democratic legitimacy behind them.
No, they're sanity questions. They're fact questions. There's no such thing as being non-binary, not a thing. And also they and them, that's for plurals. You're not a plural.
We know that the public are overwhelmingly against this, and the most important thing, of course, is the number of people who identify as non-binary make even the transgender community seem huge. I mean, we're talking about such an infinitesimally small section of the population. We don't need to spend so much time catering to the most obscure minorities in this country.
The response should always be, no, you're not. It's not a thing. Now say and do something interesting, because claiming that you're non-binary or claiming you're doesn't make you interesting. Queer, whatever the pluses stand for this. I have to say, got a delightful meeting booked with a senior member of staff at my daughter's school today about their celebration of the LGBTQI, all of that nonsense. Yeah, not happy about that. That conversation, I'm not sure, is going to go very well on either side, but we'll see. But there we are. Thank you very much indeed, Rafe Haydel-Mancu from the New Culture Forum. Always good to talk to you. My pronouns, as you will know, Matthew Laza, are she/her Imperial Majesty, and I accept nothing else. But
and we would would never dream of saying anything else.
Very briefly, you've got about 20 seconds. Non-crime hate incidents.
The government needs to show common sense, get rid of them. It will be a real indication that the government is on the side of common sense.
They're not going to do it, though.
They may not.
I'm going to urge them. They're not going to do it.
I'm going to urge them.
Why do you try and get back into government, be an advisor, giving them some sensible ideas?
I might have too much common sense for them.
But isn't that something that's telling you? And you worked for Ed Miliband. I mean, imagine.
Well, I didn't vote for him to be leader. I voted for David, but David's comments today have been unhelpful.
$1.3 million a year.
It's a lot of money
to be paid to work for a charity.
It's a lot of money.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure anyone takes David Miliband seriously anymore. He ain't the king across the water, I'm afraid. He really, really isn't. Anyway, it's almost coming up to 11. We're going to take a break and get the news. We're back. Lots more top guests. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oifamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to say that former Labour Party advisor and now sane Matthew Larser is here.
Oh.
Sort of.
I mean, we don't agree on everything, but I think
you've been pretty sane this morning.
Well, you know,
used to advise Ed Miliband.
Yeah, don't blame me.
Yeah, I'm just
not
saying.
now. Not
just
currently.
saying. Anyway, you are with Talk, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, on your connected device, it is great to have your company with you all the way till 1. Lots more to talk about, including in this hour, Keir Starmer warning that Britain is entering an era of hard power as he slashed the foreign aid budget. That soft power we hear so much about to boost defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. He reckons it's an extra £13.5 billion a year by 2027. It turns out the sum is actually around $6 billion a year, and it doesn't really, according to military experts, really touch the size of what we should be spending. Well, we'll be talking to the Shadow Defence Minister, Marc Francois, about that in a moment. Also, Ukraine, we understand, has agreed a mineral rights deal with the US. Zelensky is set to sign the deal in Washington as early as Friday, going the day after Keir Starmer is due. He's flying tonight for a meeting with Donald Trump in the White House on Thursday. The deal, that we understand, does not provide a US security guarantee to Ukraine. Interestingly, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, very close to Vladimir Putin, he has said this morning that he dismisses the idea of any international peacekeeping force in Ukraine post a ceasefire deal. He said it would fuel the conflict. So I'm not quite sure how we think we're going to actually protect Ukraine's borders, even as they exist right now, without those peacekeeping forces. Also, net zero, again, very linked. You cannot have a strong economy, you cannot have strong defences if you've got mad, insane, costly net zero policies. Nevertheless, the government's climate advisors, the Climate Change Committee, no, I didn't vote for them, you didn't vote for them, they've got no skills whatsoever in science or climate change whatsoever, but apparently they tell the government what they should do to achieve their net zero targets. They say that millions of Brits must install heat pumps in their homes, which don't work as well and have cost a lot more than gas boilers. They're going to have to buy electric cars, fly less, probably not at all, to go on holiday, and cut their meat and dairy consumption. The cost of that, by the way, by 2040 will be an estimated £320 billion, which of course we've just got easy to spend. Plus, English cricket is under fire today after going ahead with plans to play Afghanistan, despite calls to boycott the fixture because the Taliban have banned women from playing any sport at all. Oh yeah, and from working and from getting education and leaving the house and talking even. Why on earth are England's cricketers playing against Afghanistan? We'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. As I say, Matthew Larser is here. He's a former Labour Party advisor. Good morning once again to you. Good morning. Just before we go to our next guest who's waiting on the line, just want to bring this to you. Breaking news. The judge who signed the Chagos ruling, the international judge, the International Court of Justice, he's a Jamaican judge called Patrick Robinson. He's one of the judges who ruled it back in 2019 that the UK should hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, even though Mauritius has no claim on them whatsoever, as rapidly as possible. This was an advisory, not a requirement thing. He says that he says that the UK should pay £18 trillion in slavery reparations as well. Do you think he's got a little bit of bias?
Yeah, I think he's got an agenda, certainly. I mean, I think the issue, I think, is how we relate to these international court rulings, because sometimes the best thing to do is just to ignore them.
Or don't sign up to courts which have got idiots like that in charge.
Well, I mean, prisoners' votes. I actually made a documentary when I worked for the BBC about the Human Rights Act. Met the very unpleasant man who'd been in for a pretty heinous crime, who took the UK government to court to get prisoners' votes because he deny it. He won in Strasbourg, and all parties have just ignored it. And we're still here. Right. We haven't had a court army from the European Court. Exactly. So I think there's a lesson for everybody there.
Well, there we are then. Well, do you have a word with your mates in the Labour Party? Right then. I'd love to hear from you today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But also the government cut the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending. What is that, the right decision or not? Tell us why. Was it enough money? Also, the government's climate advisors say Britain will have to install those heat pumps, buy electric cars, give up foreign holidays, eat less meat, all of that to hit net zero targets. What's your reaction to that? I think those things are very much linked in, because you simply cannot have a booming economy and spend money on defence if you've got net zero basically damaging your economy. I want to hear your thoughts. 00344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. You can text the word talk to that number and then your message. You can send us a message on X at talkTV. Calls to charge at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Right, let's get to our next guest today to talk about all of that, actually. Marc Francois, Conservative MP and Shadow Defence Minister, joins us. A very good morning to you once again, Marc.
Good morning, Jim.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you about the Chagos news in just a couple of moments, but I do want to focus, first of all, on that defence budget announcement from Keir Starmer. Quite a shock decision, quite a shock for his cabinet, and particularly David Lammy's Foreign Secretary, we understand, when he announced an extra £13.4 billion extra a year would be spent by the government from 2027 or by 2027 onwards. But apparently the extra sum is not really £13.5 billion. It's actually £6 billion once you allow for what they were planning to spend anyway. Was that the right decision to cut foreign aid to boost that spending? Is it the right amount? Should it be more? Tell us your thoughts.
Well, we've been pressing the government to spend more on defence for months. So in principle, we welcome the decision. We welcome the uplift on the defence budget. When you get into the actual numbers, Julia, this is a bit like an annual budget from the Chancellor. What do I mean by that? On the first day, the government make all these big announcements, which sound impressive. And then when you start to look into the details, you know, journalists and politicians, you start to unpick it and you realise a little while later on, it's not quite as impressive as it first sounded. And that process is going on with this announcement. So by 2027, it's £13.4 billion in cash, but some of that money was going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
In real terms, once you account for inflation, it's about £6 billion.
Which we're told by our former NATO commander, Chris Parry, a few moments ago, it's just a sticking plaster. £6 billion in defence terms doesn't buy you very much.
Well, it will help. And the most critical thing we need to do is to start to replenish all of those weapons that we gave to Ukraine, quite rightly. But, you know, if you order a new Storm Shadow missile this afternoon, it'll take a year to turn up. So we need to start placing those orders very soon, and we need to start getting that equipment flowing back to replenish our own war stocks. That money will help in that regard. But I think we're going to come on to Chagos, because the risk is that actually, if they do this bonkers Chagos deal, a lot of that money, rather than going to our armed forces, will get siphoned off to go to Mauritius.
Well, this is the thing. When the government was asked, number 10 spokespeople asked yesterday from the lobby journalists, so, you know, will any of this increased spending, some of it's on, you know, I mean, some of that increased spending will be going on things like, you know, defence staff's, you know, pensions and things like that. We know an awful lot of it is on our nuclear deterrent. That takes a big whack of our defence spending, which I fully support, but nevertheless, we don't have, that means less for the conventional army and navy and RAF, of course. But they refused to say whether or not any spending given on the Chagos Islands, giving the money, this 18 billion quid to Mauritius for no good reason at all, to rent back a military base we already own in the Chagos Islands after giving the Chagos Islands away. They refused to say whether they would or would not include any of that money. I mean, it's a simple answer to say no, it wouldn't. So I think we have to assume that it does. And if they don't know already, that's also a worry, in which case it's even less money, in which case this is pie in the sky. This is just a little sop to try and please Donald Trump ahead of a meeting in the White House tomorrow, but it doesn't make a damn bit of difference to British or European security.
Well, if that money really is going to go to Mauritius for Chagos, then it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? So John Healey, the Defence Secretary, forgive me, on a different media outlet this morning, was asked 4 times, can you rule out that this money is going to go to Chagos? And 4 times he ducked the question. If the answer was no, you're quite right. He would have just said no.
It's a simple answer. I would expect the government to know that. Can I say though?
In the House of Commons this afternoon, we have now called an Opposition Day debate on the Chagos deal.
Yeah.
So we will have an opportunity for several hours in the Commons this afternoon to remorselessly press ministers on this question, and we will be absolutely dogged on it. Is this money for Chagos or not? Right. So they've got to answer that question, because if they're going to be honest and say it is for Chagos, then this is what has happened. They've taken a lot of that money from the aid budget and they put it into the defence budget. If it turns out that that money then goes from the defence budget to Mauritius, in effect, they raided the aid budget to give it to the Mauritians.
Yeah.
Now, when Labour backbenchers cotton onto that, they're not going to be happy little teddy bears, are they?
Yeah, certainly not. Can I just ask you, though, in terms of the Tory policy, at the election in July last year, the Tories were promising to raise the defence budget from 2.3% of GDP to 2.5% by 2030. Now, Labour said they wanted to raise it. They never gave a date. Now they're saying they'll do it by 2027. What is the Tory policy now, then?
Well, firstly, we welcome the fact that they've done it. And James Cartledge did a media round on Sunday where he said, and Kenny Badenoch said this in a speech, ironically, yesterday morning, a few hours before Starmer made the statement, that we now believe we might need to go further and faster.
But again, we might believe... You know perfectly well, defence spending was cut in terms of real terms of what was actually required under the Tory government for a very long time. Total failure. Even the targets for spending that the Tories had in the 24 election were frankly, not rational and not meeting the size of the demand that we face. And now we're talking about possibly maybe increasing them. The Tory party. I mean, I'm sorry. You can criticise the Labour Party, but the Tory party have got us into this mess.
Julia, you know me, I've been calling for higher defence spending since the day I was first elected 23 years ago. So I've been pretty consistent on this one. I mean, I could drown you in copies of Hansard where I've called for more.
I know you have.
But no, we clearly, as the international situation continues to deteriorate, which unfortunately it does, we're going to have to spend more. So the fact that the government have said they're going to go to 2.5% by 2027 and then to 3% in the next parliament, if they were re-elected, we welcome in principle that direction of travel. Okay. Of course we do. What we're going to try and ascertain this afternoon, though, today in the House of Commons is a lot of that money earmarked for Mauritius, for Chagos. And we expect clear answers to straightforward questions. OK.
I'll come back to Chagos in a moment, but in terms of what happens in Ukraine, I mean, the immediate issue of Ukraine and the message that goes out to Russia. There's been a lot of talk from Starmer and from Macron as well about a peacekeeping force, and Starmer last week said that he would commit British troops to a peacekeeping force. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, very close to probably to Donald Trump as well. So, there you go, that's a Freudian slip. Very close to Vladimir Putin, probably, and Donald Trump. He said, that's just not an option. He said that would actually, he says, fuel the conflict, dismiss the idea of a peacekeeping force. If there is no European peacekeeping force, if there is, as we understand from this Ukraine-US rare earth mineral deal, no promise of a US guarantee to Ukrainian security, where do we go from here?
Well, firstly, on a point of principle, it's not Lavrov's decision. It's not Putin's decision. If the Ukrainians, as part of some peace settlement, wanted to invite allied forces onto their sovereign territory, Russia shouldn't have a veto. Russia should never have invaded in the first place. Zelensky is not a dictator. He's a hero. He's the guy who, when they tried to overrun Kyiv, to kill or capture him 3 years ago, he was offered a helicopter flight out of Kyiv for his personal safety. What did the guy say? He said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. That's Churchillian defiance. You've got to admire that. So, the barbarian, the invader, is Putin, and he and Lavrov, I've met Lavrov, by the way, he and Lavrov shouldn't have the ability to tell the West where they...
No, we shouldn't. But at the end of the day, if the Russians say, you're not having a peacekeeping force, we will consider that to be basically a NATO advance on our borders, so we're not accepting it. What do we do? Because how can Ukraine give up and ceasefire, give up a load of mineral resources, give up Crimea and the east of the Donbass region, for good, if they've got no guarantee of any sort? If we're not willing to put troops in, they haven't got a guarantee. So what happens next?
Well, I'm not privy to the details of this minerals deal, and I'm sure President Zelensky will have asked for some security guarantees from the United States. So I can't pretend I know the details of that when I don't
think anyone does yet. Yeah.
Well, but let's see what comes out of that.
Okay.
But there's an absolute point of principle here, Julia, and that is the Ukrainians must be involved in any negotiated peace settlement. We can't do it above their heads after everything they've been through, after having literally children's hospitals blown up by Russian cruise missiles. We can't just have a discussion above their heads and say, there you are, it or lump it.
That is exactly what Donald Trump is doing.
Be in the room. Yeah,
okay.
He has to be in the room.
All right. Just finally, I did wanted to come back to you on this Chagos issue. Patrick Robinson, a Jamaican judge who sits on the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, that gave that original ruling, advisory, not demanding, advisory to Britain that basically the Chagos Islands weren't ours and we need to give them to Mauritius, even though Mauritius have never owned the Chagos Islands, they're thousands of miles away. I mean, it's utterly the most bizarre ruling I've ever seen. But Patrick Robinson has also ruled not only against the UK and the Chagos Islands, he's also since called for Britain to pay more than £18 trillion in reparations for slavery. And he says even that sum is an underestimation of the damage caused. Should we really be paying any attention to a court that has judges who think that Britain should pay slavery reparations to the tune of £18 trillion?
Well, Julia, in Britain, we're used to judges being impartial. We think of people in a red robe and a wig who are very learned, and that, you know, they're supposed to look at a decision impartially and use their best judgment. The ICJ is a political court. It's a branch of the United Nations. And don't tell me there's no politics in the UN. You've got a political court which has given a political judgment, and this just amplifies that. And it's very important to remember, we have an opt-out. When we joined the ICJ in 2017, and this relates also to the reparations issue directly, we signed up on the basis that no judgment of the ICJ that affected any current or past Commonwealth country would be binding on the United Kingdom. We have a veto. So even if it's only an advisory judgment, even if it were a mandatory judgment, we're excluded. The government could use that veto.
But have chosen not to. Again, we'll see at the end of that debate today whether we're actually going to get an answer on the Chagos Islands and whether or not a load of that money, which is being taken off the foreign aid budget, supposedly spent on defence, is actually going to be spent effectively renting back the Diego Garcia military base in the Chagos Islands that we already own after we give it away to Mauritius for no good reason whatsoever.
If I may, Julia,
very briefly.
There's a very special technical military term for that. It's
called surrender.
Yeah, it's bonkers. in effect, we would be surrendering British territory and then paying for the privilege.
Yeah, it is utterly, utterly mad. Mark Francois, Conservative MP, of course, and Shadow Defence Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Matthew Larser, look, you're a former Labour Party advisor. If you were still working for a Labour leader, would you be advising them on that Chagos deal?
I would be advising them to use the excuse of Donald Trump to quietly, or as quietly as possible, to shove it in the bin.
But this, I mean, again, why did they sign up to it in the first place? Also, this ongoing thing about slavery reparations. When I get my reparations from the Romans and the Vikings, then come for me for reparations.
Have you not put your bill in?
I mean, we should do.
The Danes not quaking.
I mean, I'm sorry.
As JHB has unleashed them. Look, I think
bizarre.
It's got to be. I think what we've seen with yesterday's announcements, not just on defence, but also on the fact that police are actually going to be allowed to follow the phone when they can see where it is, and they're not going to stop at somebody's front door. They're actually,
Well, they are. They're not. The police won't have a right of entry. Whatever this law says, they won't have a right of entry.
It's better. It may not be perfect, but it's moving in the right.
Is it?
There was some common sense. The government, I think, was showing, at least trying to show common sense yesterday, which is not always in the first 6 months.
Whilst allowing the expansion of non-crime hate incidents, but changing the name of them.
So, well, I hope that the change of the name of that hasn't come from the government. It's come from the College of Policing, and I think that needs to be sat on, and a grip needs to be got on that, because the two things people want from the government is they want people to feel that a grip has been got, that the government is in control of events, not at their behest. And secondly, that it's showing common sense that, it might not agree with everybody who agree on everything, but it's showing an instinct which is on the side of common sense.
I was very impressed, for instance, with the Keir Starmer's announcement on defence yesterday. But again, I don't like it, and I don't care whether it's Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, David Cameron, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, or Keir Starmer. I want you to be honest with me. Don't tell me you're spending an extra £13.4 billion a year when you're not. It's £6 billion. And answer the question: is this money, part of this money, going to go to the Mauritius for the Chagos Islands? We want straight talking. If we're not going to get straight talking, people aren't going to trust. And this is still our money. Whether it's said in foreign aid or whether it's spent on defence or, on people here at home, it's our money. And we have a right to know how much is being spent on what.
And I think the danger today is that Mark Francois says it's the pressure's going to build. They've got the Tories doing a debate in the Commons this afternoon.
They're going to have to answer the question.
They're going to have to answer the question, and by not answering the question, they're losing the goodwill that the announcement yesterday generated.
Which is what they do, because the people in charge are absolutely useless. Everyone thinks they're all clever, playing 4D chess, Dominic Cummings style, but clearly not. Clearly not, because the answer to the question, is any of this money going to Mauritius for the Chagos Islands, is no. It's the only answer, and it's the only acceptable answer, and you're going to end up having to make that the only answer. So why not start from that?
Don't bleed for 24 hours.
It's utterly bizarre. 11:23 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Also on the net zero madness. Yeah, you know, stop eating meat and dairy, buy an electric car, you won't be allowed to buy anything else, get your heat pump fitted even though it costs more and it doesn't heat your home properly in a cold winter's day. And sorry, foreign holiday? I don't think so, mate. You're not flying abroad anymore. That apparently is what the Climate Change Committee, the government's official advisors, want us to do to achieve net zero. My response to that is disappear somewhere and do it very quickly. But I can't say those actual words on air. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Your calls welcome. They're up next. This is Talk.
Peace, actually you should be arming up to make sure that you stay at peace.
Right.
And what we've done is be incredibly lazy, indulge ourselves in all the ideological clap-trap expenditure which you were referring to, including net zero, and allowed our military to be hollowed out. And at the same time, actually, we've gone abroad and we've sort of picked fights. You know, you can't make it up. If you're going to go abroad and you're going to yank people's tails and declare war as we did in Afghanistan, then Iraq.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:26 is the time. Matthew Lars's still with us. Let's get the thoughts of you on all these big topics we're talking about. Tim is on the line in Southwark. He's called on 0344 499 1000 on defence spending and cutting the foreign aid budget. Tim, what do you make of it all?
Good morning, Julia.
Morning.
I think it's a little tripe.
Thank you for choosing that word. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm trying to behave myself.
Me too. What's tripe about it?
A Typhoon aircraft is £117 million.
Yeah.
How many does that buy us?
6 million, yeah, and it won't just be those, and you've got all the training. And you reckon the extra, the real terms, extra £6 billion doesn't really get us anywhere?
I served in the Air Force for 10 years. Yeah. Admittedly, quite a few years ago, we were using equipment 30 years old.
Yeah.
A labourer is paid more than a soldier now.
Yeah, I've never understood this. How we pay our soldiers so little. I know that you can get accommodation and things like that, but included. But it does seem that I just don't understand why we treat our military forces so badly. So you think it's not enough? Would you have spend a lot more?
Yeah, cancel foreign aid apart from the things that you suggested. Cancel the lot. Charity begins at home.
Yeah.
And there's a good old military saying, actually, there's no such thing as a bad soldier.
That's
only bad officers.
That's very interesting. So you just don't trust it. So what did you make of all the charities and left-wingers going, clutching their pearls? Oh, this is appalling. It's terrible. Us cutting our foreign aid budget.
This is probably going to be quite controversial, but I don't care.
It's not controversial on this show. It's up there. It's up there, isn't it? With Rory Stewart complaining about his wife no longer getting another. They were expecting another $1 million budget from US aid to pay for their charity, educating Afghan women about modern art. I mean,
and my grandfather was 103 when he died.
Yeah.
So he'd seen every Labour Parliament there'd ever been.
Yeah.
And he always said to me, don't vote for them because they always mess it up.
No, I have to say, I mean, you know, they're doing a better job of messing it up than even the Tories managed, eh? Tim, thank you for your call. So appreciate that. Mark is on the line. He's in Norfolk. And Mark, you want to talk about the Net Zero Climate Change Committee demands of us.
Hello, Julia.
Good morning.
First time I've spoken to you.
Thank you so much for calling.
I'd like to start by saying no one speaks more sense about net zero on British radio than you do. No one.
Oh, shucks. Shucks.
A quick tale of our last 5 years. 5 years ago, coming out of COVID, we, my wife and I, semi-retired, we thought we'd build our own house.
Oh, wow.
So we approached someone, agreed to buy a plot of land, spent about £10,000 before we realised that the ridiculous nutrient neutrality issues meant that we had to say goodbye to that £10,000. So we moved away and cancelled the deal.
Yeah.
We then bought an old redundant primary school that hadn't been used for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
Falling down, the locals wanted it refurbished. We thought that would make a nice forever home. So we took a gamble. We spent hundreds of thousands of pounds buying it, along with its associated playing field.
Yeah.
I've been in business a long time, and I thought, well, we're probably not going to be able to do anything realistic for at least a year.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, this will take 5 years. You may have heard there's a housing shortage.
Yeah.
We thought we'll build 4 houses on the playing field, and the funding from that investment will help us to refurbish the school.
Yeah.
So that we're not reliant on the state, never have been, never will be. But we've had to engage with bat surveys, tree surveys, ecology
Lesser
surveys,
spotted newt. Yeah.
surveys. We've had to engage with Natural England, with Highways, with Historic England, the local authority. And if you picture someone that in this country at the moment tells you that there's not enough affordable housing, they are the same people that will want to save the planet, chase net zero. And I have to tell you, those people are the root of the problem and why there is not enough affordable housing. There never will be, because they're not affordable to build because of these people.
Well, do you know what? We're going to be talking to the leader of the Climate Party in a few moments. I'd love to get his thoughts on that. But this is the thing, and all these other strictures. You're like, well, new homes have to have heat pumps, and you know, basically these rules about, you know, the number of EVs, electric vehicles that have to be sold. People don't want to buy them, and they literally can't give these things away. People don't want to buy them. They want to stick to their reliable diesel and petrol cars, and certainly for heavy goods vehicles and like. And it's just all these things telling us what we should do. What's interesting is none of the people who have these, you know, put out these edicts, none of them actually live by them themselves. They're all the same people who go and jet around the world and say you shouldn't fly.
Julia, it's a national disgrace. Those people that want to get on in this country, invest in this country, so they're not reliant on the state, are set off on a race with their ankles tied together. It's going to take us 3 years to move a single telegraph pole that is obstructing one of the 4 building plots on our land. 3 years.
I mean, mind-blowing, but not at all surprising. Mark, I so appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. 11:31 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be talking about that net zero madness, because that is what it is, with the leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Hold on to your hats for this one, folks. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Matthew Lars is still with me, former Labour Party advisor, who was working for Ed Miliband. I'm never going to let you forget.
I know you're not.
In 2015, he was there when the Ed Stone, but not responsible. It's just amazing to think that Ed Miliband was actually the leader of the Labour Party and could have possibly become the Prime Minister of this country. Terrifying, by the way. But do you agree with what he stands for right now? Which he is the Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary. Both sides of that job title being mutually exclusive, OK? You can't be both. And he's advised by the Climate Change Committee, which is an unelected, unaccountable body of people, as far as we can tell, with classics and English degrees, no qualifications in science or climate at all, who basically said today, well, this is what we think we need to do to get to net zero targets. And they're basically saying millions of Brits, 1.5 million a year, are going to have to install heat pumps instead of the central heating that actually works. Basically, 3/4 of the cars that are sold are going to have to be electric cars. We're going to have to fly less, if at all, on holiday. And we have to cut our meat and dairy consumption as well. It's going to cost us £320 billion for the privilege of making all these changes. Ed Miliband is fully signed up to this stuff. Why?
Well, that's a good question, because look, I think we do need to decarbonise the economy. I think climate change is an issue, is a big issue and a challenge for the planet. But I think you need to bring people with you, and you need to do it in a sensible way, because we need to make electricity cheaper in this country. Now, some of the things the government's doing, like the announcement on new small nuclear power stations, which it made 2 weeks ago, will make a real difference. The Tories failed to build a single nuclear power station in their 14 years in power. However, if you are seen to be a zealot, if you are seen to be in the pockets of campaign groups, then you're going to lose public support. Well, I actually think what's interesting is that it is only 1.5 million heat pumps a year. It's not forcing everybody to rip your gas boiler out. You were saying earlier that you'll be clinging to the last moment to yours until they force it out of your hands. Well, I hope that isn't going to get there. For some properties, heat pumps do work. They don't work for every property. It depends on the property. And,
I'm afraid that isn't in the law that requires heat pumps to be put in for new properties. I hate to tell you.
No, absolutely. Which is why I'm not. If I was the DESNES, as they call it, secretary, I would be a little more flexible than Ed is proving. So flexibility, common sense. That's my theme of the day.
I think in a couple of years' time, Ed is going to be very flexible with his time, because he's going to be out on his ear.
When I used to work for him, we had a gas boiler.
Well, of course he did, and of course he still has. He lives in a house in Primrose Hill. I can guarantee you right now, he still has a gas boiler.
And 2 kitchens.
2 kitchens, exactly. Matthew Lusser, thank you very much. Love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the thoughts of Ed Gemmell, leader of the Climate Party. A very good morning to you, Ed.
Morning, Julia.
Let's start being nice to each other, at least. Let's start. What do you make of the Climate Change Committee basically saying we're going to have 1.5 million heat pump installations a year? Currently, it's only about 30,000 a year. 60,000 a year, sorry. And basically limiting our meat and dairy consumption, basically making flying so expensive that most people can't afford to fly abroad, and requiring us to drive electric vehicles, even though they basically can't give away on the forecourts right now.
Well, I mean, I think what you're probably expecting, Julia, and basically we've chatted about this a few times before, I think those recommendations are pretty weak, actually.
Oh, God.
I think they should be coming up with much more positive recommendations, looking at how we can grow industry and business and use this as a spur to growth, rather than trying to make it an excuse for it and suggesting that these are not going to hurt us too much, and so let's dibble and dabble and do little bits.
I'm confused. No, I'm sorry, Ed. I'm confused. They're weak recommendations. You think they should go further, or you think they shouldn't have recommendations, we should just boost the economy? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Oh, no. Well, definitely we should boost the economy, and you and I definitely always agree on that.
But you can't do that with net zero, so it's one or the other.
Oh, no.
Pick a side.
Let's go back a step, come back to the Climate Change Committee.
Yeah.
Look, where we're going at the moment, globally at the moment, the net zero market, let's say, so GDP and the net zero economy for the entire world coming in 2030, based on a McKinsey report, is about $12 trillion. So call it 10 trillion quid. Now, that's a big, big amount of money that's going to be in the net zero economy, whatever happens coming up in the future. Now, at the moment, Britain is well behind the curve on taking advantage of it. What we need to do is get serious, bring forward our entire target, get the thing done by 2030, which we can do. Concertina, and just before you laugh too much, Julia, let's concertina all that investment that we're being told we're going to make anyway, 81% decarbonisation by 2035, 87% by 2040, do it all straight away.
Yeah.
And out of that 10 trillion, if we were the first major economy to get there, how much would we grab of it? 500 billion? Imagine putting 500 billion onto our GDP in
Brilliant.
2031.
Oh, that'd be
20%
absolutely
increase
brilliant.
in our economy, and then seeing that going on
That'd
in the
be
future.
absolutely brilliant. And absolutely. And I'm going to be Royal Ballet lead dancer and live forever. I mean,
I'll come and do your training for you.
I mean, this is absolutely, big fat cream pie in the sky, abject nonsense, Edgar Moore.
Right,
with
Julia,
all due
can I
respect,
ask you-
and not much respect is due for those things. Okay, how on earth do you think we could achieve any of that? You know perfectly well, and the Climate Change Committee, they're not shy about this. They produce budgets, they produce documents, it's all in black and white, and it's been there for more than 10 years, like what they actually want to do, okay? Here's what they're going to do. They're saying quite clearly, I think 60% of our efforts to reach net zero targets will have to be our change in our lifestyle. People don't want to give up their cars. People don't want to eat less meat and eat less dairy. They want to eat what they choose. They want to be able to go on foreign holidays. One of the greatest changes in my lifetime has been that we can actually travel abroad. We can see other cultures. We can enjoy a sunshiny beach instead of sitting in the rain in Cornwall. Beautiful, beautiful Cornwall, but as I always did as a child. I'm sorry, people don't want to change their lives like that. They want to have central heating. They don't want to have, ice on the inside of their window pane. 95% of us have gas boilers. You know why? Because they work really well at heating our homes so people can actually keep warm in the wintertime. You're talking about turning all that back, going back to pre-1950s, eventually the industrial age, because this is all impossible to deliver.
What we're looking at, Julia, is starting the new industrial age here. And where we are at the moment, I'm going to come for a question to you I've always been wanting to put to you. What is the spur for growth in Britain over the coming 25 to 50 years? What's the big industrial plan? Currently, the Office for Budget Responsibility says our debt is going to increase 3 to 6 times our GDP in the course of the next 50 years. That's an untenable debt. We haven't had a plan for decades in government, a proper industrial plan on how to get us out of it. If it's not going to be net zero, where we know 93% of the world is on their way there at the moment, what is it going to be, Julia?
Here's the thing. One of the key points about capitalism and the Industrial Revolution is that you don't have the government or any government or any unappointed, unelected, unaccountable committee directing what we do. What you do is you allow the market to decide. So, for instance, when we replaced horse and carriages with motor cars, you didn't have to ban horse and carriages. You didn't have to have quotas for how many people were going to buy cars. Do you know why people wanted to buy cars? Because they were more reliable. And they ended up being a lot cheaper than having to deal with the horse. And the horse, obviously, car lasts forever and has to be fed and stable, etc. People adopted new technology. When people started having mobile phones, you didn't have to force people to have them. When we had the computer being invented, laptops, you didn't have to force people to do any of that. Didn't have to force people to do things like sign up to subscriptions for Netflix and things. As technology has moved on, people adopt it because it's better. You don't need to have an industrial policy based on it. You don't need government direction. You don't need unaccountable, unelected committees telling us what to do. When the technology is invented and it works, people will adopt it anyway. We don't have the technology to abandon fossil fuels yet. We don't have that. Even if it was developed in the next 10 or 20 years, we'd still be reliant on fossil fuels for the rest of the century at least. You know that, I know that. Anyone who pays any attention knows that. So telling us to move away from that before we have got that replacement technology, which I am very sure human ingenuity will develop at some point, but they haven't yet, we will do that. But until then, if you want us to use fewer fossil fuels and rely on unreliable, insecure, more expensive solar and wind power, you are condemning us to go backwards, not forwards. And a country that goes backwards on energy is a country that gets poorer. And that means less growth, not more.
Well, let's just start with a correction. You always say utter rubbish. Gas is more expensive, than solar and wind. And it has been now for a long time.
No, it's not.
And the reason we pay so much money for our energy prices, Julia, sorry, that's wrong, is the price of gas. Every half hour, we set the wholesale price for energy production, for electricity production, based on the energy source it's coming from. Gas is always the more expensive one, and it forces our prices up.
Why is gas more expensive? Why is gas getting more expensive?
1 second, Julia.
Ed, why has gas got more expensive? Why has gas got more expensive? Because there's less of it and more demand for it.
No, gas got more expensive because it's controlled by sources we can't control, and it's on international markets. Yes, the war forced
sources
it up. Now,
we can't control.
Just while we're commenting on this,
wouldn't that be an argument for us to produce our own gas, to frack and to drill in the North Sea?
Why do you think that the Energy Secretary of America is trying to get Britain to stop its renewables and go to gas? He's made 170 million over the last 30 years fracking for gas. His share price went up 25% in his company when he became the Energy Secretary. And then he comes over and lectures us. Why? Because America's got an almost limitless supply of gas it can sell to us when ours runs out.
I know. And aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky when Russia invades Ukraine that we can go and get gas from America because we haven't got enough? Because people like you support us not getting our own gas.
Julia, you always give the wrong impression. We don't need to do that. Tidal power in this country could be supplying a vast amount, and we haven't done it. But let's get back on one of your previous things. You talked about government regulation driving us forward, driving our innovation and our investment.
I said it doesn't drive us forward.
First, I'm not suggesting government regulation in every single area at the moment, and we have a problem in this country at the moment by cherry-picking areas to put policy on. So we cherry pick it, we force a bit of policy onto it, subsidy or a tax or whatever it might be, and we try and force it forward. We can't do it that way. We need to do it and look back on when big things have happened. For instance, when you go onto a war footing, and then what happens? Everybody's in the same direction. Every little bit of the economy, every little bit of the system starts pushing in the right direction to make things successful. And you talked about innovation. I can't remember the phrase you used, but yeah, at some time or other, we'll get the innovation to do that. But we're not creating the opportunity for that innovation to scale. Now, what's happened in a wartime situation, we had boats we were building in World War II prior to it, was taking 240 days to build. In the middle of the war, we built them in 4 days and an average of 40 days. We innovated at 5 to 50 times quicker than we had done before.
So you want us to be on a war footing? I hate to tell you, Ed, we can't be on a war footing because we haven't got the energy. We've depleted our ability to make virgin steel. We can't afford to make concrete because our energy costs are so high. Why are they so high? Because we are reliant on renewable energy for much of our electricity, but it has to be backed up by nuclear power. They're talking about building nuclear power stations. They haven't actually built anymore. Neither did the Tories. And gas power. And we got rid of a load of our gas storage. We're having to import gas, liquefied natural gas from America, and taking gas from gas pipelines in Europe. Europe is going to run out of gas at some point, and we're going to be cut off, and we won't have our own supply. And you're saying that's not the problem. 80% of our economy relies on fossil fuels. You can't replace it with a wind turbine.
Right, Julia, OK, as always, 15 different things in the introduction to that for me to pick up on.
I'm just giving you some facts.
Let's go back to the first bit. Let's talk about steel. You and I both agree that shutting down our virgin steel production is stupid and replacing it only with a recycling plant. What we should be doing is what's being done in a number of other places in Europe, particularly for H2 Steel in Sweden, is they're putting in a fully decarbonised green steel plant, producing the same as Port Talbot. They've got forward orders. They're making money on it already. And we should be doing that. Now, another thing that has come up recently, both the Climate Change Committee and recent things, is these aviation, and the expansion of airports. Now, we've got all the green activists up saying we shouldn't be expanding the airports and everybody else is saying we need it for growth. Look, it's not about the expansion of flying. It's about the damage it causes through the emissions. And if we were to build runways using green steel and green cement, both of which can be done, both of which we have innovative companies in Britain that are doing it, that don't have a market for their products, then we would build a state-of-the-art future runway that others would copy.
I'm perfectly happy for people to do that. Just finally,
let's have low-carbon flights on it. Those flights that would stimulate
I deliberately
creating electric, hydrogen, and other flights.
When I'm on Skyscanner, I deliberately choose the flights that aren't low carbon because it really annoys me. It's one of the options. But there we are. Just finally, because time is against us, it always is. Ed, do you think it's acceptable though for the Climate Change Committee to basically say that people should be either told to, whether it's regulatory or whether it's pricing, which stops people from eating dairy and meat as much as they want, or from flying as much as they want, or from what car they can buy, an electric vehicle or not? Is that acceptable to you, that impact on our freedoms? Yes or no?
The told to you bit is obviously wrong. Let's go back to
but if you do it by pricing people out of the market, like you put an extra tax on things so people can't afford to do it, it has the same impact.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but taxing and subsidies is also a way of driving investment in our country. So, I mean, it's always done as being negative if we want it to be negative and otherwise not. You've got to direct it in some way into the way that's going to,
You've
make
got
money
to tell
for the UK
people
and
what
drive
to
the
do.
innovation. That's not the way I would do it.
Do you think that people should be free to make their own choices about their own lives, their own transport, and what they eat?
They should, of course, be able to do that, but that doesn't mean that they should be able to do things
you tax it so much they couldn't do it.
For everybody else. But the way I would do it, I'd set the big target. So the policy decision right at the top, how we're going to run the entire economy, the industrial plan, actually have a plan, which no one's had for decades, see how we can drive our economy up wildly huge, putting 20% onto GDP, and then that filters down into the choices people are making underneath. I wouldn't be prescribing it straight from the climate change.
You just get to it eventually. They always get to it eventually, don't they? Ed, honestly, deep sighs, but I do not want to live in your world. I really don't. Ed Gemmill, leader of the Climate Party, thank you for that. It's coming up to 11:49. We're going to take a break. Going to talk about England. England's cricketers, our male cricketers, are playing Afghanistan today. But why? Because Afghanistan doesn't have a women's team, because women aren't allowed to play sport or indeed even leave the house or speak in public. So why on earth is England playing the men? That's up next. This is Talk.
At peace, actually you should be arming up to make sure that you stay at peace.
Right.
And what we've done is be incredibly lazy, indulge ourselves in all the ideological clap expenditure which you were referring to, including net zero, and allowed our military to be hollowed out. And at the same time, actually, we've gone abroad and we've sort of picked fights. You know, you can't make it up. If you're going to go abroad and you're going to yank people's tails and declare war as we did in Afghanistan, then Iraq.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to remind you that Premier League action returns to Talk this evening. Title contenders Liverpool take on Newcastle, and it's live and exclusive here on Talk. Don't worry, though. I'm sure you'd much rather. You can watch Kevin O'Sullivan on our YouTube channel or on your smart TV from 7, so you don't have to miss a minute of the brilliant Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock tonight. Right now, let's turn to another sport. In this case, it is cricket. Now, we got used, did we not, to our footballers taking the knee at every opportunity, not just the England players, Premier League players as well, over Black Lives Matter. Apparently, though, when it comes to sport, women's lives don't matter quite as much. Oh, isn't it funny how often that happens? Because the England cricketers are playing Afghanistan. Men, of course, in a match today. But what is very strange about that, they're playing them despite the fact that Afghanistan are completely in breach of International Cricket Council's rules, which require any member of the International Cricket Council to have a men's team and a women's team. But, of course, there isn't an Afghan women's team anymore. They're in exile. There's no official Afghan women's team because women aren't allowed to play sport in Afghanistan anymore. Play sport, not allowed to have a job, not allowed to go to school, not allowed to go to university, not allowed now even to leave the house or to allowed to speak outside their home when their voice can be heard. And yet, England cricketers are going to play the Afghan team. Isn't this the same as playing apartheid South Africa? Saying, not a problem, black people aren't allowed in the team, they don't have equal rights, but we don't care. Well, hold on a minute, we did care when it was black people who were being treated as second-class citizens. Somehow it turns out our sports bodies don't seem to care when it's women who are being treated as second-class citizens. Black lives matter, women's lives don't. That's the message I've got today. Well, let's talk about this with Jim White. He's a sports writer at The Telegraph. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. I have to say, I was talking to my colleagues at Talk Sport this morning. They were very, I've got to be honest with you, they were very sort of like, oh, don't really know, I haven't really thought about it. Oh, my God, we had a couple of years, didn't we, of our players in the football taking the knee. The England cricket team took the knee, although they were the first international cricket team to stop taking the knee. At least that's one small good thing. And yet the England team are playing Afghanistan today. And, you know, everyone's apparently fine with it.
Yeah, I think there's two big precedents in sport for how you use sport to make political statements. The first is, as you mentioned, apartheid South Africa, where sport was such an integral part of the apartheid regime that by actually banning playing them, it really changed. It made a difference in South Africa. And the other more recently is Russia. Since the murderer Putin invaded Ukraine, they've been banned from all international competition. And we know that international sport meant a lot to him because he paid so much money to host the World Cup and the Olympics. Now, Afghanistan is just absolutely a prime example of why you should be using a boycott to affect change. Listen, I don't know whether it would affect change if the England team went against it, but the point is, by playing them, as you say, they are completely going against all the policies that the governing bodies in England brought forward. We don't even call players with a bat a batsman or a batswoman anymore. It's a batter because we believe in the equality. And yet here we are, cheerfully playing a side whose women, you know, as you say, they can't even go to the park, never mind knock a ball around in the park.
But this is the thing, I completely understand the people who say, I don't want politics and sport to be mixed at all. I'm all in favour of that. I don't want all the anti-racism messages. I don't want the Black Lives Matter thing. I don't want Palestinian flags in football stadiums. Can we just keep the sport separate from the politics? Except, as you know, all international fixtures, certainly anything that happens with the Olympics, anything happens with, certainly with football, even more so than cricket, is absolutely political. I mean, every single country that gets awarded the FIFA World Cup or the Euros, we know perfectly well massive amounts of politics has happened, and usually, let's face it, a huge amount of money has changed hands as well. These massively corrupt organisations. We know that. But it was these sports bodies themselves who insisted on having politics brought in. All that taking of the knee, Black Lives Matters, all of those. I mean, constantly having, armbands to show this or that cause. They brought very divisive ideological politics into the game, onto the playing fields, which most spectators, most of the audience didn't want, but they pick and choose. But I've never understood. I've always said to people when we look about sexism, if you take the position, if someone is unhappy about how a black person is being treated compared to a white person, replace that with a woman and tell me whether you've got a problem or not, because it's amazing how often we in this country and around the world, international sport bodies, they will be very critical of quite rightly, of outrageous inequality between blacks and whites in South Africa or other countries. But whenever it's a difference between men and women, particularly in Muslim countries, well, it's a cultural difference, so that's okay. But I'm sure the whites leading South Africa through apartheid years viewed it as their culture, that black people they believed to be inferior to them and should have separate rights. Why do we accept that it's a cultural religious difference when it's women, but it's not okay when it's treating someone on the basis of their race?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on this. And the other thing, of course, about it is it's not just politics; it's international prestige. This is what governments are seeking. And although the Taliban have been, really against pleasure, effectively within their own
no music,
country,
no dancing,
Actually, cricket they regard as quite an important way of making a noise on the international stage, and they will often be seen at cricket matches. They'll be seen celebrating the cricket victories. So it would hurt them. What I find interesting about this, Julia, is yes, in the media there's a lot of noise about it. People are saying this should and shouldn't happen. But it's not discussed at all within the governing body.
No.
It's not discussed at all at the ICC. And I don't really follow that, because Afghanistan is penalising people just by the way they are born, in the same way that South Africa did. I just do not understand why it's a different issue.
I'd love to see the England cricket players. Well, maybe they could take a knee for the women, or we just take it. Maybe they prefer it if women weren't allowed to speak outside the home, or indeed in the home. Again, I don't want the cricketers put up with this, but it seems to me this isn't even a thing that the international cricket, body should be dealing with, or even England cricket. This should be the government say, no, you don't play sporting matches against a government that subjugates half its population.
It was the government in the apartheid era.
Exactly.
Because if you remember, the Rugby Football Union used to try and go against it and would send teams to South Africa to play there.
Absolutely.
So it was a governmental insistence.
It's a very, very strange thing. I just think it's absolutely appalling this match is going ahead. I really do. Sports writer at The Telegraph, Jim White, thank you so much for joining us. Matthew Larser, former Labour Party advisor. If you were advising them right now, would you have allowed this match to go ahead?
Absolutely. They should stop this match. Jim's absolutely, and you're completely right. It's a disgrace. It's a shame, not just on cricket, but on Britain.
But that's the thing. You can't pick and choose. International sporting bodies, you've got to have politics or not have politics.
Absolutely.
Pick one, and I can understand if you're going to stick to it. At the end of the day, if you're representing our country, I think the government should have a say.
Totally. And look, remember people like Peter Hain protested against South African apartheid? He was a government minister. Where are they now? Step up, speak out and stop it.
It's only women. It's only women. And again, if someone had written a hurty tweet against one of those women, then everyone would be up in arms, wouldn't they? Women actually being locked in their homes and able to get education or have a job doesn't seem to matter so much, let alone playing cricket. But there we are. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I am Julia Hartley-Brewer, and you are certainly hitting the phones. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the two big topics we are talking about today. In particular, Keir Starmer cutting that foreign aid budget to boost defence spending, he announced yesterday. Was it the right decision? Tell us why. Also, talking about the latest net zero madness, as the government's climate advisors say Brits will have to install heat pumps, buy electric cars, give up foreign holidays and eat less meat and dairy to hit net zero targets. But I mean, you know, they're unelected, unaccountable. I don't remember agreeing to this, did you? Did we get a choice at the last election? What's your reaction to that? Numbers for both those questions. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk, then your message to 87222. You can also get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Also going to be talking about Ukraine and that mineral rights deal, and more details on that have emerged. Also, the Chief Executive of NHS England, Amanda Pritchard, who announced her resignation yesterday. Resignation, love. You were pushed, love. Clearly, after meeting Wes Street in the Health Secretary, she was told your services are no longer required. But she is going to get a six-figure sum for stepping down. Money well spent, what do you think? Plus, PMQs is back. Indeed, it's just started in the House of Commons. Peter Cardwell is watching it, so you and I don't have to. He's going to bring us the highlights, if there are any, just a little bit later. We'll find out what Kemi Badenoch is asking the Prime Minister about, and indeed other MPs as well. Right now, at just coming up to 4 minutes past 12 o'clock, let's welcome my next guest to the show, Paul Mason. He's a journalist and columnist at the New European. A very good afternoon to you, Paul.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much. I have to say, we've got a lot of lefties on the show today. We've got Matthew Larser, former Labour Party advisor, in the studio. We've got you on the line. Let's get your thoughts on where we are on that announcement from, just first of all, what Keir Starmer had to say, cutting the foreign aid budget to boost defence spending. We're told by him, yes, an extra £13.4 billion more to go on defence. Actually, in terms of real terms of what would have been spent, what was going to plan to be spent and what more is going to be spent, we're looking at an extra £6 billion. Just the question we're putting to our audience, was that the right decision? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Well, for me, Julia, this is not only the right decision, it's the start of a big sea change in the way we think about our national priorities. A lot of people are focusing on the figure and on the issue of swapping it for foreign aid. But if you listen to what Starmer said, it was something much more profound than that. He said, we are going to take a new approach to national security. And he listed all the attacks that are going on right now against our country by Russia. And what he's trying to say to people listening to this is that we can't ignore this anymore. It's like, of course, nobody wakes up in the morning, nobody sensible, I hope, wakes up in the morning thinking, how can we confront Russia? How can we make things more tense? But they're making the world tense. And so this is not just about Ukraine and helping Ukraine, although part of it is. It's about saying, look, we've got some fantastic defence industries in Britain. We've got a fantastic defence workforce, scientists. Let's invest in it to boost our own national security. And let's invest in it to boost our own economic security.
OK, you said this is the start of a sea change, an extra $6 billion in a few years' time. Does that touch the size of the needs? Because we've had a former NATO commander on earlier saying this is just a sticking plaster.
Well, it's not enough. And I've said on record, I've been advocating this move for a long time. And I've said 3% is the minimum we're going to need. So I think the next battle for those of us who want serious rearmament is to bring that 3% into this parliament.
Well, that's it, because Keir Starmer said it'd be 3% if he gets elected again from 2030. But you're saying bring it in now.
I'd say bring it in, but let's be careful. The capacity of the UK armed forces and UK industry to actually absorb a big injection is not already there. So if it were up to me, what we'd be spending this money on tonight was things like training courses for welders. Some of your listeners may be welders. If they are, they will know that it's a seller's market. If you're a welder, for example, in the nuclear industry, nuclear qualified welders can earn a lot more than teachers. If they're prepared to do overtime and travel to the right place. And why is there a shortage? Because the private sector is not training them fast enough. It's the same with electrical engineers. So I would say we need to put money into that And surely, if you target that, you think about some of the places in Britain that have been left behind, and I'm sure your listeners come from some of those places. I personally come from a place in northwest England, left behind. I'd like to see a welding academy parachuted into there.
Oh, we just need a whole load of technical and engineering and building skills. I mean, we need that, build that industrial base again, don't we? There's certainly. And what do you make of the decision to cut foreign aid? The foreign aid budget was again 0.7% of GDP was plucked from thin air anyway. Then it went down to 0.5% from the EU Conservative government. It was already being used, a lot of it actually at home rather than abroad, to house asylum seekers who were failed sitting in those hotels while they're waiting assessment and then being allowed to stay here anyway. We're now saying it's going to be 0.3% according to Keir Starmer, with a view to getting it back up to 0.7% at some point. They reckon that'll save £6 billion realistically. Was that the right decision? Because an awful lot of people on your side are absolutely up in arms and appalled.
Well, I'm not up in arms. I would have preferred that they start explaining to people that the scale of rearmament that we're going to need is going to be done through borrowing and taxation. I'm afraid that's the way government services are paid for. You can cut some other services. There are other things that I think could be cut, and we maybe come to them. But so for me, the strategic thing is we need to borrow to invest in defence. But I actually, when I think about what's happened with repurposing the money from aid to defence, one way I would put it is this: aid for us as a country is not some kind of conscience money for what happened in the 19th century. Although I think people like me, as you know, left-wingers, are critical of the way our government has acted in the world. It's not conscience money. It's to create soft power for us on our behalf, so that when you and I get off a plane with that blue passport and it said British citizen, that means something in parts of the world where it wouldn't mean something if we didn't invest in stability and well-being.
I just think that's absolute nonsense. I'm with. I mean, I really do. I just don't think that makes a blind bit of difference. Our soft power is the fact that virtually every film and bit of new music and TV programme in the world is made in English. That's our soft power.
Well, there's that as well, but I wouldn't underestimate it.
Okay.
However, for me, there's no point to soft power without hard power. And what we're learning from Donald Trump is that you only have freedom of action in this world. And again, it's a horrible thing to say. If like me, you've been against many of the wars that have taken place, the only freedom of action in this world is for big countries with big armies and nuclear weapons. I'm afraid, if you're listening to this and you think, I wish that wasn't true, I wish it wasn't true, but that's how it is.
I'm very impressed with you. Again, you've always, there's a lot of realpolitik there. Let me ask you specifically about Ukraine then, because this is being motivated by Ukraine and indeed by Donald Trump and his demands. And again, I thought he was right in his first term when he said, that Europe needed to step up. And why shouldn't a NATO member providing 2/3 of the spending within NATO on military, or as the US has been doing for God knows how many decades, why should they be stepping up to pay when countries aren't even fulfilling their basic requirement of 2% at the time of NATO spending? And we know countries like the Baltic states and Poland, they're at 4%. They understand the threat from Russia. It is very real to them. Now, there's been a lot of talk about some sort, if there is a ceasefire deal, that you can have a peacekeeping force. Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron of France talking about their troops taking part in that. Now, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has dismissed that idea today. He's called it empty talk. He said that would draw Ukraine into NATO. He would totally destroy, he said, the rights of Russian speakers in Ukraine, and basically said that this would fuel the conflict, not help with the ceasefire. At the same time, we've also learnt from the Ukraine's Prime Minister in the last half an hour or so that, yes, there has been this mineral deal agreed with the US, but for the first time we've learnt that it does include security guarantees, that he says, to build lasting peace. So what do you make of those two developments today?
Well, until we see the writing on pieces of paper, we don't know anything about this deal. I've just been with a fairly well-connected Ukrainian expert who said to me, I don't know either. Nobody knows what's in it. Okay, but the critical thing is, it's for Ukraine. Ukraine is sitting on the minerals that will help power the AI industry, the computer industry, the semiconductor industry, your electric car, if you want one. I know you're not so keen on them. And that's for Ukraine to bargain away, because if it was me and somebody said, do you know what? Germany is offering you a security guarantee, and somebody else said America is offering you a security guarantee. I know which one I would do the bargain with. Okay, so that's for them. What's our role? I don't think we should be calling, if there is a peace and Ukraine signs a deal with Russia saying, look, okay, for now, you take this bit, we're having this bit. And incidentally, when I was last in Kiev 3 years ago, I met lots of Russian speakers, Ukrainian Russian speakers, who are totally pro the Zelensky government and Ukraine. Okay, but if Ukraine decides that there is a deal to be signed, the force we need to send is a force that is basically there to say we guarantee the peace. It's not, peacekeeping can be like keeping two sides apart, can't it? It can be like patrolling a dusty place where there's two sets of people who hate each other. That's not what we're going to be doing. We should send a limited force backed up by a big stick. And that big stick has to, that's what they need to spend the money on.
The trouble is with any guarantee, whether it's from France, Britain, Germany or America or a combination of all of them, is it worth the paper it's printed on? When
I think it is.
Well, anyway, in 1994, the US, the UK and Russia agreed the Ukrainian borders when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons. People say, well, what duty of care do we have to Ukraine? Well, it's in black and white. It's in black and white in 1994 that we would guarantee their borders. Well, when they were invaded in Crimea in 2014, no one did anything. When they had a full-scale invasion in 2022, no one did anything. So why on earth would any ordinary Ukrainian, let alone Zelensky, trust any sort of guarantee from any other Western nation?
If President Trump is prepared to backstop it and say, OK, sign on the dotted line, we guarantee the security of the borders that are now created, even though we don't recognise their legitimacy. That, given Trump's general antipathy to helping anybody except America, that would be a big step forward. And this is why it's so important that Keir Starmer is going over there. Let's remember, whatever you think about Keir, and I know many of your viewers and listeners didn't vote Labour, fine. Whatever you think, he's going there with the authority of a British Prime Minister who's pledged to put troops in, which is not popular on our side of politics, and who has just hiked defence spending at the expense of aid. So he's going with a very clear, as it were, thing to put on the table. And I think if we can bring Trump into a security guarantee, that's one thing. Without the Americans, for the Europeans to guarantee the security of Ukraine against Russia is quite hard, because only two of us have nuclear weapons. We've got no history of that kind of nuclear diplomacy. So, and again, isn't it terrible, Julia? Me and you have been in political journalism for a long time.
Far too long.
But did you ever think you would end up talking about something like this?
No. Oh, exactly. But again, if I'd been in charge, there would never have been an invasion. Not what Donald Trump says, because he's got a great relationship with Putin. But you'd make it very, very clear to adversaries that the reaction to you doing that action will be so great you won't do it, and that's how you deter. Can I ask you just finally, just in terms of you're a staunch Labour man. You're very much on the left. Very solid on these issues, unusually, I think, for people on the left. How do you think this is going down with an awful lot of Labour, not just Labour voters, Labour councillors, Labour activists, a lot of people who desperately campaign to get a Labour government and a Labour Prime Minister in power? Many of those MPs on Labour's backbenches behind where Keir Starmer is answering questions at PMQs right now. We've got a Prime Minister who is cutting foreign aid. He said only a few years ago, on record, cutting foreign aid would damage Britain in the long run, boosting defence spending, going basically on bended knee to Donald Trump later today and meeting him in the White House tomorrow. How is that going down with Labour Party members?
He's not going on bended knee.
Isn't he?
I think he's going from a position of relative strength and authority. But let me answer the question. I think it's going down like it did in the 30s. In the 1930s, 11 million people signed a petition calling for the Air Force to be disbanded. You know, there was a massive pacifist mood, not just on the left of politics, but in sort of, as it were, the liberal centre. And people are waking up to the idea that this Russia thing isn't going away.
Yeah.
The threat to our national security, everything that we on the left want, trade union rights, rights for minorities, a thriving democracy, none of that's possible. None of that's possible in a Europe that's controlled by Vladimir Putin. And I think, therefore, Keir and people like him are leading the left of politics to where we did in the 1930s. By the end of the 30s, Labour was the most solid supporter of rearmament, and I'm pretty convinced, thanks to his efforts and others, we will get there again.
Indeed. I'm not sure there's any other choice. Paul Mason, journalist and columnist at the New European, really appreciate your comments. Matthew, last, I mean, there's an awful lot of sense being talked by some of you lefties today. As former Labour Party advisor yourself, I mean, this is, I don't think this is going to be going down too well with many Labour voters, but again, surely, you know, realpolitik is there. But there's also an element where you think, well, what's really changed? Other than Donald Trump getting into power, what has really changed? The threat from Russia has been there all this time.
I mean, I don't think the threat from Russia suddenly appeared on the horizon, which is why the government did come to power. It is a manifesto pledge to increase to 2.5% of defence spending. At some point, I think the timetable was accelerated. But I think Paul's absolutely right. In terms of Labour voters, I think that a lot will see this as common sense. In terms of Labour activists, well, the party has changed a good deal, I can tell you, because the people at meetings the cast list has changed as the hardcore Corbynites leave. I mean, Paul and I would have been on opposite sides of the Labour Party for a long time. Paul would have been on the left and I would have been on the sort of more mainstream of the Labour Party, and now of course we both see the common sense on this, so I think the party will see it more than you might think.
Well, I hope so. Now, it's very interesting. Prime Minister's question has been ongoing while we've been talking. We don't play it to you live because we like you too much, and but Kemi Badenoch has been asking about the basic sort of congratulating the Prime Minister on, she says, listening to her advice about defence spending, although again the Tory pledge was to increase defence spending 2.5%, but you know, by 2030. So, but she's also pointed out that the Defence Secretary out and about, John Healey, today, and again, number 10 yesterday, failing to confirm whether or not this new higher defence budget will include paying money to Mauritius and the Chagos deal. So basically, paying money to lease back the Diego Garcia military base in the middle of the Indian Ocean, which we already own. Okay. And she asked Keir Starmer to confirm either way. He said the money is for our capability on defence and security in Europe, as I made clear, extremely clear yesterday, he said. And he said the Chagos deal is, quote, extremely important for our security and for US security. Well, except, of course, you don't need to do a Chagos deal. There's no requirement for us to give this land not back to Mauritius. They've never owned it. That's not, I mean, that's a non-denial denial, isn't it? Sort of, I mean, we're not getting any sense of this. It looks very clear to me that some of this extra spending is going to be money given to Mauritius to lease back a military base that we already own. That is not going to fly with voters. Well, not when people are worried about putting the heating on.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a non-denial denial, and it may be because secretly he's hoping, or not so secretly, hoping that the issue goes away, and therefore the money for the Chagos deal doesn't have to come out of any budget because there won't be a Chagos deal. And I think that actually may be what ultimately happens, because it's not sustainable to not say where the money's coming from. If you're going to stick with the deal, you're going to say you're going to pay for it.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Do get in touch. Lots of calls coming in about that foreign aid budget being cut to boost defence spending. Where is Chagos? Is money going to be spent on giving, again, just insane to give Mauritius billions of our hard-earned tax money to lease back a military base we already own. We could just go, no thanks, move along, bye-bye, ignore that ridiculous ruling from the International Criminal Court. But I want to know, is this the right decision from Keir Starmer or not? Also talking about the net zero madness, the latest from the Climate Change Committee. Lots of calls coming in. Do keep them coming. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
actually you should be arming up to make sure that you stay at peace.
Right.
And what we've done is be incredibly lazy, indulge ourselves in all the ideological clap-trap expenditure which you were referring to, including net zero, and allowed our military to be hollowed out. And at the same time, actually, we've gone abroad and we've sort of picked fights. You know, you can't make it up. If you're going to go abroad and you're going to yank people's tails and declare war as we did in Afghanistan, then Iraq.
We were really sort of quite surprised and, well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree over whether he's successfully achieving that or not, but if you're saying something is your number one priority, you would expect that to be the thing you're spending most money on, wouldn't you? I mean, certainly that's how I would.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:23 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be talking about Amanda Pritchard. Bye. The NHS Chief Executive. Bye. Getting a six-figure payoff for leaving as a useless boss of the NHS. We'll talk about that with Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman. Also going to be talking to Peter Carball. He's got some clips for us of Prime Minister's questions. He'll bring us the best bits, the highlights. Remember, he watches it, so we don't all have to. But largely, it seems to have been on Ukraine and Chagos Islands as well. Let's get to your calls though right now. Lots of you getting in touch 0344 499 1000 about what's going on in terms of defence spending and foreign aid. In fact, actually, let me read you a couple of the messages that we've got on the issue of defence spending being boosted. Richard says, on foreign aid being cut as well, you should cut it more and spend it on other things. Why are we giving aid to India? Exactly. A country that has its own space programme. Ned says if he listens to Trump more often, the UK might actually start to heal. And Dawn says the foreign aid budget is not fit for purpose. It's being used for the wrong things. And Edmund says having our defence budget up to 2.5%. He says, I think Trump was hoping for something a bit closer to 5%. Yeah, even the Americans don't spend 5% though, so that's a load of abject nonsense there, isn't it? Let's go to Phil. He's on the line in Hull. Very good afternoon to you, Phil.
Good afternoon, Julia. Great show.
Oh,
really enjoying it. Really enjoying it.
All the better with you on it. What do you want to say?
May I just say a couple of things? First, on this Chagos thing, what an absolute joke. Giving away something that you own and paying for the privilege to someone thousand miles away. What they're going to do, invaders. And this court's a joke. But to get back to the aid budget. Yep. Why on earth would anybody set an arbitrary target for aid, which varies obviously every year, when you've got to spend it every year? So you get to the 5th of April, which I presume is the deadline day, and you I've got $3 billion left. Where can I shovel it off?
Oh, I know, and that's literally what happens. It's the same as local councils with their budget for mending roads. They suddenly decide they're going to fill some potholes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. And when you see, I saw a thing from the Sun the other day about the various things that we spend on, transgender dance classes in Peru or somewhere, or, absolutely ridiculous things where there's people here.
No, but we're told...
who haven't got a house.
We're told it's all about soft power. But again, there's soft power and there's doing stuff that promotes, our values, and I get that. But most of the promotion of our values actually comes through English language, which, thankfully to us in America, is basically the second language of the entire world now. Sod Esperanto, this is the language of the world. It's language of business, military, economy, music, entertainment, film, everything. But also spend the money on stuff, as we were saying earlier, clean water, contraception for women who want it, and girls and women's education. Those are the three things, and vaccines, four things. The four things that would really make a difference. Everything else is a waste of time.
You said, Julia, that we've spent £300,000 doing inoculations for kids against polio or something. I would say great. But to me, it's like, if there's a tsunami somewhere, do you need some help? There's been an earthquake
Absolutely.
Can we help? Can we help? I don't mind that, but to set an arbitrary figure every year that you must spend, to me, is ridiculous. And may I just say quickly on net zero, that guy is an absolute nutcase. He is.
I think you're talking about Ed Gemmell, the leader of the Climate Party.
No, I'm talking about...
Ed Miliband.
Ed Miliband, you know, who was blowing in the wind with his ukulele. He's just took on board 3 people who were all Extinction Rebellion people.
Yeah.
Now, what signal does that send to people?
Oh, he's totally captured. He's totally captured. But, you know, again, Keir Starmer's still the Prime Minister. He decides who's in his cabinet. He decides the policies and the funding for them. As far as I'm concerned, it's Keir Starmer I blame the most for it. But bear in mind, we can also blame Matthew Larser, my guest in the studio, because he used to work for Ed Miliband. Anyway, Phil, such a great call. Thank you very much indeed. I say we're the home of common sense. Not just us, it's the audience too, Matthew.
I do have to point out, not in his environmental days did I work for him.
Oh, no, there's a bit of a stutter there. I don't want to be associated with that.
Well, you know, I mean, I think Ed needs to listen to callers like that, because he needs to understand that people are not quite seeing that it will make sense. And
no, he would know. I know what he would say. He would just shout climate denier at him. That's what he would say. He would say, even as we are dealing with Russia right now, Ukraine, even as we face the threat from China, even the threat of Islamofascism in the Middle East and indeed on our own streets, climate change is still the #1 threat to Britain, is what Ed Miliband thinks. That is certifiably bringing the men in white coats insane.
I think it is a challenge to Britain. I'm not sure I'd make it the #1 challenge to Britain. But I think
Keir Starmer said
that's
it is
why.
the fastest.
Well, the government's got a big decision coming up on this Rosebank oil field, oil and gas field, which is the one that the previous government approved. The courts kicked back. It's now in the government's pocket. The government's got to decide whether yes or no. The government has to say yes. And Ed, if he rebels against that, he shouldn't be part of the government.
Well, yeah, but he just shouldn't be part of the government because he's useless. But there we are. Let's get some more messages about the net zero issue, actually, before we get to a call. Faye says, how can people afford to purchase electric cars when they're having to pay so much to heat their homes? This one, the government's climate advisors say Brits going to have to install heat pumps, buy electric cars, give up foreign holidays, eat less meat and dairy to hit net zero targets. Your reaction? You've managed to keep it clean. So well done, everybody, because I couldn't when I saw that this morning. Alice says, my only pleasure for working 40 hours a week is one overseas holiday a year. This is nothing compared to all those MPs flying all over the world to attend meetings that could easily be done online. Alice, imagine how much impact that would have on me and my lifestyle. She will mock me for going on my holidays. Bobby says we need a referendum on net zero. Oh, we do. They're not going to let us ever have a referendum again, Bobby. I think we all know that because we vote the wrong way. Ian says, of course, the climate advisors say that. Their salaries depend on it. India says, I don't know if this is the country that's messaging me or someone called India, we have no choice. Renewable energy can't generate the same power as oil, gas and nuclear. As we near the last of the reserves that will be preserved for industry, transport and military. When that happens, we'll need the infrastructure in place to go green if we haven't already. And David said, still waiting for someone to explain what difference reaching net zero will achieve. Yeah, I mean, nada. It will achieve zero. Let's go to Nigel, who's on the line in Portsmouth. Hello, Nigel. Thanks for waiting on the line.
That's okay, Julia. Actually, you earlier called the chap. I could feel the exasperation in his voice. The chap who's bought a school. The chap who's bought a school, trying to do it up, and he's just coming up against loads of bureaucracy. Yeah. You know, he wants to do it to build houses. There's a wall opposite our house in Portsmouth that fell over last April. It's a council wall. It's about 2 metres high and about 10 metres long.
Yeah.
We've had so many people in suits. It just needs a bricklayer. I'm working construction. It needs a bricklayer. It's a 2-day job. It's still, and they're there all the time. We get letters. We're going to have a bat survey. We can have an environmental impact survey. It's a wall. Bats don't live outdoors. It's a wall.
It's so painful. Yeah, but all of their jobs depend on it.
You're right. Now, our daughter actually works in climate finance, and she realises it.
Shame on her.
No, actually, she said, I'm going to get my nose in the trough while it lasts. And look to her.
Oh, that's where the money is right now. When they talk about green jobs, it's not creating green energy. It's simply about paper pushing.
And particularly in Africa. And, you know, she's actually they're building a new power station in Togo, which is a very poor country in West Africa. They need cheap, reliable energy. Yep. Guaranteed sunshine. But even with guaranteed sunshine, the cheapest, most reliable form of energy for them to build a power station is gas.
Yep.
Look at it. Gas power station, Lomé. They're building it by the port. they can import gas really cheaply, and they can give their citizens guaranteed power, because my wife's in Togo, I've been there loads of times, and their power cuts all the time because they rely on imported. But what I phoned you about is this heat pumps, this guy you had on. I've recently refurbished the church. It's a really big job. It's like a 6-month job. And one of the things we need to do is look at the heating, because there was a gas boiler as big as the moon. It needed to be replaced. And in the end, we went for 11 heat pumps. They're big. But, you know, in a church with a church hall, they work great until it's cold. When it's cold, they just, honestly, they genuinely, when it's 5, 6, 7 degrees, you turn them on. 10 minutes later, it's lovely and toasty. But there is a point round about 2 degrees by which below they simply don't work.
Which is when you most need your heating. Oh, Nigel, I'm going to have to leave it there because time's against. This is a great call. Thank you so much. Covered a lot of ground there. 12:32 is the time. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be hearing from Roy Lilly about the NHS Chief Executive Amanda Pritchard standing down, getting a 6-figure salary, or a 6-figure payoff. She's already on a 6-figure salary. And we're going to be getting the highlights of Prime Minister's questions. Sounds it's been quite lively. Even Diane Abbott has had her tuppence worth today. I'm sure you're looking forward to that. We'll be hearing from Peter Cardwell about that. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining me. As I say, Peter Cardwell's coming up very soon to tell us what is what's been happening in PMQs. Matthew Lars is still with us, former Labour Party advisor. Just before we get to our next guest, I'd love to ask you about Amanda Pritchard, the NHS Chief Executive. She's been there since 2021. She was a Chief Operating Officer, so darn senior during the years before that. She's just a time server, bureaucrat, absolutely useless, waste of space, been criticised in 2 Health Select Committee reports as someone who just doesn't have the leadership ability to take the NHS forward and to lead the reforms. Meeting with Wes Street and the Health Secretary, man, I've got a lot of time for in this cabinet the other day, and basically after that meeting decided to take the very difficult decision to stand down. But she's going to get a 6-figure payoff. What do you make of all that?
Well, I think it's absolutely right that she's going. I think we need fresh leadership at the top of the NHS, and in particular what Wes is trying to do is make sure that ministers, when ministers say something, it actually happens. Remember when he said
that's a crazy idea.
I know. You know when he said a few months ago there should be less diversity, the fewer diversity jobs in the NHS, and he was just ignored the next day. More advertised.
There's been a hiring spree since then.
Absolutely. So you know, ministers need to be able to have a direct impact. Clearly, the structure needs to change, and so it's good that she's going. Frankly, 100 grand, which is a lot of money, but in the amount we spend on the NHS as a drop in the ocean, is worth it to get change.
Well, £1,112,000, £500. I mean, God, that's three times average salary. That's her. Plus, she's walking away with an NHS pension worth £1.75 million. She was on an annual salary of 270 grand in useless. She'd been there. I mean, she'd been there for 28 years. Absolute time server.
I mean, nobody should be effectively in the same organisation doing the same thing for 28 years, just moving up with a new job title. So let's hope that fresh leadership does get it down, because the NHS has got a crisis. If it doesn't deliver now with the extra money the government's putting in, then questions will be asked.
Well, exactly. Well, let's talk to Roy Lilly about this. He's a former NHS Trust chair who joins us. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Goodbye and good riddance to Amanda Pritchard.
Well, yes and no. I mean, she's been there through, the second part of COVID, and the NHS has taken a battering. She has her fans in the NHS. She has her detractors. It was pretty clear that Streeting wanted to get rid of her. So
Well, why did he want to get rid of her?
because he wants to restructure the arrangements that there are at the top of the NHS. And
But he wanted to reform the NHS to work better, and she obviously wasn't willing to do it or able to do it. I mean, then why is it on the one hand, on the other hand, Roy?
Well, I don't think that's true. I think that the situation is this: he has inherited still the fag end of the Andrew Langley reforms.
Yeah,
and that left NHS England as the sort of operational arm to run the NHS, and the Department of Health that was there to do what? And what Streeting wants to do is to get closer to running the NHS himself.
Yeah.
And so that means he's got to get rid of NHS England, whoever is there. Now, he's got rid of Richard Meddings, who's the chairman. It was a dot on the card that Pritchard was going to go. I mean, we're all predicting it. You didn't have to be a bookmaker to see that happening. And so he's given her the heave-ho. It's cost him a few thousand quid to get rid of her. Now he's bringing in Sir Jim Mackey from Newcastle, who is really very highly thought of. Alan Milburn, of course, is on his board, and Alan Milburn is effectively running the Department of Health at the moment. And so what they're going to try and do...
former health secretary himself, obviously.
Yes. Without any legislative time or any money, they're going to try and crash together NHS England and Department of Health boards, because they both have boards. Yeah. My guess is they will reduce the numbers on the two boards and then work in a legal term that's called working in common. Now, the problem they've got is that the Treasury gives money to the Department of Health, and then it gives money to the Department NHS England. And they can only use their monies for that purpose. Putting together in common means that they can run policy together and decide on policy together, and they can come fudge the legal and financial aspect.
A lot of people listening to this be going, well, how does this impact me? At the end of the day, taxpayers fund all funding for the NHS, and the NHS is a government-run monolithic organisation. It seems to me to be blatantly obvious that our elected, accountable leaders, whether you've voted for them or not, should have the final say on how things work. I don't see why NHS England should be some supposedly sort of independent body that decides healthcare policy. And yet we were told again and again during COVID that it was NHS England's decision to basically shut down pretty much all healthcare for non-COVID patients. Cancer patients in their 30s not getting treated because, COVID is killing people in their 80s and 90s. I mean, absolutely outrageous
that's
decisions.
Not true.
Well, that is. I've literally spoken to people that it happened to, Roy.
It is not true. What you've just said isn't accurate. Let's make it accurate, and then you could be critical. Accuracy is that during COVID, the government passed a piece of legislation that took away from the NHS its operational decision making, and it was run by the Department of Health.
Yeah.
Those decisions were made by the Department of Health.
But NHS England have said that was a government decision. The government has said those were choices that NHS England made.
You just said it was the other way around.
Yeah, but the government has said. Ministers have always said, no, it was NHS England that made those decisions.
That's not true.
Well, all we know is no other country in the world shut down their healthcare to the same extent. As I said yesterday, Amanda Pritchard was in charge in 21. She was COO in 2020. Amanda Pritchard is responsible for more people dying than Harold Shipman. I'd rather have Harold Shipman in charge than her.
This is nonsense. Originally, Simon Stevens was the chief executive at the beginning of COVID.
I know.
The first wave of COVID finished. Simon resigned and became a lord and all the rest of it. And Amanda Pritchard came in and ran the second part of the COVID issues. They were the operational arm. The actual operational decisions were made under the Contingent Liabilities Act, which was passed by Parliament to give the operational decision making to the Department of Health. They were made by politicians. So all the lockdown decisions and all the rest of it were made on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, but They were made by politicians.
I can remember interviewing the health secretary at the time, Matt Hancock. Remember him, and I can remember him telling me these were decisions being made by NHS England at the time.
Then he's wrong.
Well, he often is. Then okay, but let's
get
move
him on, and I'll tell him he's wrong.
All right, then
He's wrong.
Oh, it doesn't talk to me anymore. I don't know why.
Why.
Let's talk about rather than
he doesn't talk to me either.
Yeah, no. Just to find rather than talk about again, this is the thing. We've had lots of reorganisations. You mentioned the Lansley reforms. Most people are going, what the hell was that? We have lots of different reforms, lots of different things about who's in charge, which board, which body, which commission, whatever. At the end of the day, people just want to get health treatment. They pay their taxes, they expect to get treated, they expect to go to the GP, get treated in A&E, get their operation, not wait 2 years for it, even frankly 2 months or 2 weeks for it. What will any of these changes that West Streeting wants to do, what will anything that happens because Amanda Pritchard and the chairman are no longer in those jobs, what difference will that make to my audience today in terms of whether or not they or their family member can get treated?
Nothing.
Okay, lovely. I love your honesty.
I mean, what I can tell you what they're going to try and do. I mean, look, West Streeting's got one job. He's got to bring down waiting lists. Yeah. Now, he can fanny about with everything else if he wants to, and if he wants to make the decisions about getting down waiting lists, it's on his own head. Let him do it. But the issue here is the NHS England has already sacked 5,000 people. It's made them redundant. And there'll be another round of redundancies now. So I imagine a lot of people will be bailing
They'll
out.
be hired back in a few weeks as consultants on higher pay. You know they will.
Well,
that's what happened the last 10 times.
Well, look, I can only tell you what I think is going to happen. And they're going to try and slim the NHS England down again. Some of this stuff, the legacy of the Lansley stuff, still haunts the NHS, and it will take parliamentary time to unpick it. Now, if Streeting wants to do that, good luck, but I don't think he does. So I think what he's going to try and do is to crash together the two boards, be more influential in the decision-making himself. What will it mean for people listening to us and watching us today? Well, the big push will come from waiting lists. But, I looked at the numbers before I came on, and the novovirus numbers are going up. The flu numbers are static. COVID is going up. The NHS is still chock-a-block. Social services is knackered because no politicians want to do anything about social services and getting people home safely. So, to be honest, I would have thought, we'll kind of struggle through until the spring, and then we'll see what they're going to do.
And then we'll have our summer crisis. Always so good to talk to you, Roy Lilly. Thank you so much for joining us, as always, former NHS Trust Chairman. And also, I just love people who use the phrase fanny about. That's a phrase we don't hear enough of these days. Matthew Laza, as a former Labour Party advisor, again, just before we say goodbye to you, I mean, what do you make of all of this?
Well, look, I think Roy's absolutely right that the West Streeting and the entire government are going to be judged on getting waiting list down. It's not just the government that will be judged on that, it's the future of the NHS that will be judged on that. That's why he's going to have to make some tough decisions. He even annoyed the Queen by saying that, her pet project of very laudable thing of osteoporosis checks can't happen if you're going to get the waiting list down. Tough choices are going to have to be made.
Absolutely. Well, we should wait and see. Big thank you to you for joining us today. Peter Cardwell's going to come and sit in your hot seat and tell us what's been happening at PMQs. First, though, time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Good luck, everyone. Right, we'll be back in just a couple of moments with Peter Cardwell. What has been happening at PMQs? That's up next. You don't want to miss that. This is Talk.
peace, actually you should be arming up to make sure that you stay at peace.
Right.
And what we've done is be incredibly lazy, indulge ourselves in all the ideological clap-trap expenditure which you were referring to, including net zero, and allowed our military to be hollowed out. And at the same time, actually, we've gone abroad and we've sort of picked fights. You know, you can't make it up. If you're going to go abroad and you're going to yank people's tails and declare war as we did in Afghanistan, then Iraq.
We were really quite surprised and, well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree over whether he's successfully achieving that or not, but if you're saying something is your number one priority, you would expect that to be the thing you're spending most money on, wouldn't you? I mean, certainly that's how I would.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, also the home of Peter Cardwell, who has joined us in the studio. Talk presenter, of course, and political commentator. And you've been watching PMQs, as you do for us most Wednesdays, so we don't have to. Look, there's a lot to talk about
Yes,
today.
there is.
What did Kemi Badenoch ask? She got 6 questions to Prime Minister. What did she talk about?
Well, mostly on defence, actually. She kept asking, she asked about Chagos as well. We'll talk about that in a second. Yep. But really it was about defence spending, and particularly about not being clear about the level of defence spending. The Prime Minister saying one thing, the Defence Secretary John Healey saying another, which
the
is...
The Institute for Fiscal Studies querying a bit of it. Oh, well, let's have a little watch and a listen of what she had to ask and what he had to reply. Oh dear, I'm afraid we can't. We have this so often, don't we? The tedium of not being able to get the clip up. But basically, it's all about this 13.4 billion quid that he's claimed is extra going to be spent because you're taking up the percentage of GDP that by 2027.
And it's over 2 years, and it's by the end of the Parliament.
Again, it's always one of those, and this is like you always get this, don't you? Even with budgets and spending announcements, never quite there. You look at the small print. Institute for Fiscal Studies said, well, actually, in real terms, in terms of what you were going to spend anyway, it's only an extra 6 billion. Well, we spoke to former NATO commander Dr. Chris Parry earlier, and it's a drop in the ocean. It's sticking plaster stuff.
And you're going up from 2.3% to 2.5%, apparently 3% by the end of the next Parliament, but that involves whether Labour is actually elected or not.
A good point. I think we might now have the clip. We're going to have another go. Everyone cross their fingers.
Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defence Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister. I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, I think, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance. But, Mr. Speaker, look, if you take the numbers for this financial year and then the numbers for the financial year 27-28, that's £13.4 billion increase.
Well, again, he doesn't really answer the question because is it 30.4?
And she asked him a couple of times.
I do think there's an element with her question where it's a bit like, oh, you know, you listen to me. Well, of course he didn't listen to her, but I mean, but glib put down. A lot of laughter, and this is one of the things I think a lot of people have an issue with MPs in the Commons because it's all a bit ha 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 ha. You're talking about money that is being spent on defence,
yes,
or
to
not
save lives,
defence, to save lives. But you're also talking about money that's not being spent or being taken from people's pockets, with the people worrying about heating their. It was quite cold last night, putting their heating bill on, and everyone's being very glib and quite funny. But it doesn't quite. I don't think it quite tallies up with how most people feel about this.
No, it doesn't. And in terms of politicians connecting as well, there was a later question that Diane Abbott asked actually about the aid budget, and of course there are lots of Labour MPs very annoyed about this, but I think the aid agencies and so on, Keir Starmer will sort of take that. He'll say that criticism's fine because defence is going to be something that is much more
I can't do a very good impression of Diane Abbott, but I can do the speed with which she speaks. She and I being at opposite ends of the speed spectrum, but she said that spending money on tanks and taking it away from aid makes people less safe, not more safe. I mean, abject nonsense. As is everything that comes out of her mouth.
The only word I can say is, do you remember that BBC programme she was on? Andrew.
Yeah,
that was the only one.
I mean, I think speaking somewhere between her speed and mine would be the normal speed, I'm sure. There we are. Now, another question that came up from Camille Badenoch is also about this link with the defence spending and the Chagos deal.
That's right.
Now, explain the background to this.
So, essentially, people are wondering, is this defence uplift, is this money going for the 18 billion that is going to be going to the Chagos, going specifically to Mauritius to take the Chagos Islands off our hands? We have a judge who said that this should happen. I know you've been covering this earlier today as well. He says that this should happen, this should be the case, that this money should go. But actually, in regard to defence spending, this came up actually later as well. A Conservative MP on the backbench has asked roughly the same question, because I'm not sure a clear answer came. Is this increase in defence spending, will any of this money, because we've had a bit of jiggery-pokery recently. We've had the overseas aid spending going to pay for asylum seekers here in this country, for example. Will the increase in defence spending actually go to pay Mauritius?
Well, let's have a watch and listen to that exchange.
Can he confirm to the House that none of the defence uplift includes payments for his Chagos deal?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the additional spend I announced yesterday is for our capability on defence and security in Europe, as I made absolutely clear yesterday. The Chagos deal is extremely important for our security, for US security. The US are rightly looking at it. When it's finalised, I'll put it before the House with the costings. The figures being bandied around are absolutely wild of the mark. The deal is well over a century, but the funding I announced yesterday is for our capability to put ourselves in a position to rise to a generational challenge. That is what that money is all about, and I thought she supported it.
There's a really simple answer to that question. No.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
That's the only thing you have to say. No,
but he's not ruling it out.
No, and when he's talking about how it's for our security and US security, it's a US military and UK military base in Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia, which we currently own and have rights to, but we're going to give away to Mauritius and then pay them £18 billion for the luxury of leasing it back and then allowing Chinese influence, because they're massively in cahoots with China and Mauritius. But also he said that figures have been bandied about. He says they're wide of the mark. Well, OK. Tell us what the figure is then.
What is the figure?
It's our money. Tell us what the figure is.
What is the figure and where is the money going to come from? That's what Kemi Badenoch asked twice. That was just one of the exchanges. There was another backbench MP, Kieran Andrews, Dr Andrews, who asked that, a Conservative MP. Answer came there none. And he says, well, I'm not in a position to actually outline this to the House. We'll get there at some stage. No doubt it will come up in the discussions with President Trump as well.
His answer very much seemed to me that he can justify some of that money going to that. So, again, we haven't got any money. He says we're going to have to cut the foreign aid budget, something which, by the way, he and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, would have said would have been an awful, appalling thing to do that would damage Britain's interest when the Tories cut it from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5%. But now they're going to cut it even more, even though they're giving the Mauritian government a load of billions of our money for absolutely no reason at all. And by the way, the same court that made that ruling about Chagos Islands, we know that one of the judges, the international judge on that court from Jamaica, Patrick Robinson, who previously served on the International Court of Justice, one of those judges, in 2019, that we should hand over those islands. He's also said that we should pay £18 trillion in slavery reparations. I mean,
I don't think that's going to happen.
We haven't got it. I mean,
exactly.
It's 17 years of our GDP, 7 years of our GDP. I'm not sure we've got the spare cash. Let me also ask you about what the Prime Minister had to say in terms of the UK playing their part in a security guarantee for Ukraine. Obviously, he's going to fly to America tonight.
He's on his way to the airport right now.
He's going to meet with Donald Trump tomorrow. We understand that Zelensky is going to fly over and is going to meet with Donald Trump on Friday. We're told that there has been a deal done between the Ukrainians and the US on a mineral deal, not as, not handing over $500 billion worth as previously been demanded. But we also heard from the Ukrainian Prime Minister this morning, someone we don't hear much about, given we all focus on the President. He says that the mineral mineral deal agreed with the US supports Ukraine's efforts to obtain security guarantees to build lasting peace. That said, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has said there can't be any peacekeeping force in Ukraine. So what do you make of all of that?
Well, I think it's really interesting because if you think about, if you have a £500 billion essentially investment, money coming back from Ukraine to the United States, well, you're going to essentially have a security guarantee there. The Americans are going to want to make sure that that money keeps flowing and those minerals keep being extracted. So I wonder whether this is actually the mechanism to get some form of what could be termed a security guarantee without perhaps peacekeepers on the ground. Also, it's really interesting. Zelensky wants 100,000 troops. Keir Starmer and the French Macron, they're talking more like 30,000. I think this is all part of the mix. It's all part of the discussion. And actually, if you think about it, what did Trump want 2.5, 3 weeks ago? What did he want? He wanted two things. He wanted a mineral deal, and he wanted an increase from Western European nations to increase their defence spending. He's got both. Take away all the noise, all the bluff, all the bluster, all the people complaining.
The real winner is Vladimir Putin.
Well,
there we are. Peter Cardwell, fantastic. Great to have your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Ian Collins is here right now.
Do we get some minerals? Do we get some minerals?
I don't think we're getting any. No, apparently not.
In Northern Ireland, we used to call like fizzy pop minerals.
Yes.
So you'd have a glass of Fanta or something.
A couple of sacks of lithium coming our way as a result of this incredible deal, for the old electric batteries. Yeah. By the way, on that point, you know what I caught my neighbour doing? Some people are so thoughtful.
Is this for on air or is this an off-record chat?
This is
Mabel. Appropriate?
This is Mabel at number 87. Mabel, do you know what I caught her doing? Talk about thoughtless. It's how thoughtless people are. Driving a petrol car. Who the hell does that?
Outrageous.
Has she not read any
I
newspapers?
have a diesel car, but we don't drive.
We're all going to die.
We drive it so rarely. A genuine. No, I think Peter's driven it more often than I have. It's actually got cobwebs on the wing mirrors.
Cobwebs car.
It's got cobwebs on the ring mirrors.
Car, like something.
But I'm still going to keep my diesel car. What else are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking
other than having a go at poor Mabel?
Well, no, it gets worse because